Hey there, story lovers. This is N.O. Harry, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. What if Death's own Grim and Basilisk both bonded with Harry at age 4 and made him lord of all 3 realms? Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1, The Dark answers. The cupboard under the stairs at number 4, Privet Drive smelled like dust and old shoes and something else. Something that had no name yet but that a 4-year-old boy had already begun to understand as the particular scent of being forgotten. Harry Potter was very good at being forgotten. He'd had to learn it early, the way other children learn to ride bikes or tie their shoes, except those things were allowed and forgetting wasn't something you chose so much as something that was done to you, over and over, until you got used to the shape of it. Tonight was a Tuesday, which meant nothing to Harry except that Aunt Petunia had made a casserole he wasn't allowed to have and Uncle Vernon had watched the television very loudly and Dudley had gotten a new toy car and Harry had been sent to the cupboard 3 hours before it was dark because he'd looked at Dudley wrong. He hadn't meant to look at Dudley wrong. He'd just been looking. The cupboard was 6 steps long and 4 steps wide, which Harry knew because he'd counted. There was a cot that smelled like the inside of a bag no one used and a single blanket that was more holes than blanket, and above the cot there was a shelf with spider webs on it that Harry had stopped being afraid of because the spiders were, when you paid attention, far more interesting than frightening. He'd named 3 of them. The Dursleys didn't know that. Outside, the summer evening was warm and loud with crickets. Harry could hear Dudley's TV through the wall, something bright and cartoonish, and for a while he just lay on the cot and listened to the sound of a world that was not his and breathed the dust in and out and tried very hard not to think about the bruise on his ribs where Uncle Vernon had grabbed him and squeezed, earlier, when Harry had just asked, whether he could have a piece of bread before dinner. He was very hungry. That was the thing, tonight. Some nights the hunger was just there, the way the dust was there, the way the dark was there, ambient, known, manageable. But tonight it had teeth. His stomach had stopped growling an hour ago and moved into a different kind of pain, a quiet and insistent ache that radiated up into his chest and made everything feel very far away and very close at the same time. Harry pressed his cheek against the thin mattress and looked at the crack under the cupboard door, where a thin line of hallway light crept in. He watched it for a while. Nobody came. He was 4 years old, and somewhere beneath the hunger and the bruise and the 6 steps by 4 steps darkness, something was building in him that he didn't have words for yet. It wasn't anger, exactly. Anger was loud and red and it got you grabbed and squeezed. It wasn't sadness, though he knew that feeling too, it was quieter and lived somewhere behind his eyes. This was something else. Something older than him, or at least it felt that way, which was strange because he was 4 and nothing should feel older than him because he hadn't been alive very long, but there it was. It felt like a door. Not the cupboard door. Not any door in number 4, Privet Drive. A door that was inside him, somehow, set into a wall he hadn't known existed until this exact moment, and it was vibrating, just slightly, like something on the other side had put its hand flat against the wood and was pressing. Harry sat up slowly. His ribs ached. He looked at the dark. "Hello?" he whispered. Nothing answered. Of course nothing answered. He was in a cupboard. But the door inside him, that pressure, got stronger, and without really understanding why, Harry reached toward it. Not with his hands. With something that lived behind his sternum, some part of him that didn't have a name yet, and he pushed back against that invisible door, and then he just opened it. The cold came first. Not the cold of winter or the cold of the refrigerator or the cold of the tap running too long, but a different cold entirely, a cold that tasted like iron and old stone and something vast and patient and absolute. It rolled into the cupboard like fog and Harry's breath came out white in front of him and the spider webs on the shelf above him frosted over, and from the hallway, through the crack under the door, that thin line of light flickered and went out. Then the growl. It was below sound, almost. More like Harry felt it in his teeth and his chest and the soles of his feet than actually heard it, but it was there, low and resonant and enormous, like the earth itself was clearing its throat. Harry should have been terrified. Any 4-year-old child in any cupboard in any ordinary house would have screamed themselves hoarse, pounded on the door, done anything to get away from that sound. Harry pulled his blanket a little tighter and waited. The dark in the cupboard moved. That was the only way to describe it. Not that something moved through the dark, but that the dark itself changed, thickened, rearranged, and out of it came a shape that should not have fit in a 6-step by 4-step cupboard but somehow did, the way a dream fits inside your head even when it contains oceans and mountains and things too large for sleep. The shape was a dog, or it was the idea of a dog, or it was what dogs had always been secretly reaching toward in their long domesticated history with humanity, enormous, black, smoky at the edges as though it was still deciding where it ended and the darkness began, with eyes like 2 silver coins left on the eyelids of the dead. Those eyes fixed on Harry. Harry looked back. For a long, long moment, neither of them moved. Then the creature's head lowered, just slightly, not submission, nothing about this thing had ever submitted to anything, but something closer to acknowledgement. Recognition. Those silver eyes moved over Harry with a slow, deliberate attention that took in the bruise on his ribs and the holes in his blanket and the hunger in the tight lines of his small face and the extraordinary thing burning in his chest where that door had just opened, and the growl resolved itself into something that was almost, a sound like a voice. "There you are," it said, in the back of Harry's skull, in the place behind his thoughts where he didn't know anything lived. "We've been waiting a very long time." "For me?" Harry whispered. "For you. Specifically, entirely, and without question. You." Then the second one arrived, and if the first arrival had been cold and vast and ancient, the second was like something waking up inside the walls of the house itself, a slow electric hum that built and built until the single bare bulb in the cupboard ceiling flickered back on, not to its normal pallid yellow, but green. Deep, old green, like light filtered through 10,000 years of forest canopy, and in that light the snake uncoiled from somewhere that wasn't quite the corner and wasn't quite the shelf and wasn't quite anywhere logical at all, because logic had made a quiet exit sometime in the last 3 minutes. The word snake didn't really cover it. The way dog didn't really cover the other one. It was a snake the way the ocean is water, technically accurate, practically meaningless. Its scales were black-edged with deep iridescent green that shifted to purple and back again when the light moved, and its head was the size of Harry's torso, and it regarded him with eyes that were simultaneously gold and ancient and thoroughly, almost offensively, amused. "Well," it said, and its voice in Harry's head was nothing like the first one's. Where the hound had been low and resonant, this was dry and precise and a little like the sound of something very old being very careful not to move too fast around something it didn't want to startle. "You are small." "I'm 4, Harry said, with great dignity. "Yes. I can see that." A pause. "This changes nothing." "What are you?" Harry asked. He wasn't whispering anymore. He'd stopped whispering because whispering felt wrong, felt like apology, like hiding, and whatever these things were, they hadn't come to a place that expected apology. "What are you both?" The hound settled. It was the wrong word, it was too normal a word for what happened, which was more like a piece of the night deciding to stay in one place. Its massive head came down to rest on what should have been the floor of the cupboard and was somehow also the floor of everywhere, and those silver coin eyes regarded Harry with something that managed to be warmth without being soft. "I am Grim," it said. "The last true herald. I run before death and I run behind it and I run alongside it and I have done so since the world was young enough to remember what death meant before men started building walls around it. I am the hound that howls at the crossroads. I am the black dog that sailors see before storms. I am older than your kind's oldest story and I have come to you, Harry Potter, because you called." "I didn't call anyone," Harry said, though even as he said it he knew it wasn't true, or not exactly true. He'd opened that door. He'd pushed. "You opened a door that no human child has opened in 400 years, Grim said, with a patient precision that wasn't quite correction. "That is a call. In the old language, the truest language, it is the loudest call there is. The snake was watching this exchange with its golden eyes half-lidded and its enormous head tilted at an angle that managed to convey either contemplation or the absolute height of ironic detachment. Harry looked at it. "And you?" he asked. "I am Naga," the snake said, and the word moved through Harry's mind like something being settled into its right place after a long time being stored wrong. "I am the last pure basilisk. I am older than the school that tried to claim one of my kind for a glorified guard serpent," a flicker of cold scorn in the mental voice, like a blade turned sideways in lamplight, "older than the family that built the walls to keep me in, older than the word your kind uses for what I am. I have slept for a very long time, Harry Potter. Your call woke me." "I'm sorry," Harry said automatically. "Don't be," Naga said. "I was bored." Harry almost smiled. Then he did smile, which was something that happened infrequently enough in this cupboard that the expression felt new on his face. Then he looked between them, the enormous spectral hound made of darkness and intent, and the ancient basilisk who radiated a kind of bored, lethal precision, and he said, very quietly, "What happens now?" Grim and Naga exchanged a look. Harry had no idea how he knew they were exchanging a look when one of them had silver coin eyes and the other had golden ancient ones, and neither of them had the kind of face that human expressions mapped onto cleanly, but he knew. The way you know when two people who've known each other for a very long time are having an entire conversation in the space of a glance. "Now," Grim said, "we ask if you are willing." "Willing for what?" "To be what you already are," Naga said. "You were born to something, child. The mark on your forehead is one name for it, but it is not the only name, and it is not the truest one. You are a hinge point. A fulcrum. You stand between the living and the dead, between the tamed and the wild, between what the world is and what it might become. We are two of the three pillars of what that means. We offer you the bond." "What's the bond?" Harry asked. "Permanence," Grim said. "Family. Power, though that word is small for what it actually is. We bind ourselves to you and you to us. Not as master to servant. Never that. As equals in a triad. You will carry the authority of three realms, the realm of the living, which breathes and moves and chooses. The realm of the dead, which remembers everything and fears nothing. The realm of beasts, which is older than both and wiser than either. You will not be normal," Naga added, with the tone of someone making sure all disclosures were on the table. "You will not be ordinary. You will not be manageable, containable, or predictable. People will try to make you all three of those things. Some of them will mean well. Some will not. The bond will not make any of that easier." Harry was quiet for a moment. Outside, he could hear Uncle Vernon's footsteps in the hallway above, heavy and purposeful, and he watched the shadow of feet pass over the crack under the cupboard door and move on without stopping, without even hesitating, and something crystallized in his chest with the cold clean snap of something that had been waiting to freeze. "Will it make this easier?" he asked. He didn't gesture. He didn't need to. He meant the cupboard and the bruise and the hunger and the 6 steps and the 4 steps and the 3 years of learning how to be forgotten well enough to survive it. Grimm's eyes, those silver coins, were steady on him. There was no pity in them. There was something Harry didn't have words for yet but would later identify as regard, the particular weight of being seen by something that has seen everything and is still choosing to look. "No," Grimm said, honestly, and Harry appreciated the honesty more than he could have explained. "The pain you have already carries will not vanish. But you will never be without family again. You will never be without voice. You will never be without the knowledge of what you are. And what you are, Harry Potter, is extraordinary." "Okay," Harry said. Naga's golden eyes opened fully. "That's it? Okay. You asked if I was willing," Harry said. "I'm willing." "Okay means yes." "I have been awake for 4,000 years, Naga said, "and I will tell you that this is the most pragmatic acceptance of a universe-altering mystical bond one have ever witnessed." "Is that good or bad?" "It is," Naga said, after a moment, deeply encouraging. What followed was not a ceremony in the way that word usually implied, robes and candlelight and people standing in circles saying old words. It was more like something inevitable finally arriving at its destination. Grim moved, flowed, really, the darkness and smoke of him parting around Harry and then settling over him and through him the way night settles over a landscape, and where it touched there was cold and then there was something past cold, something that was the far side of cold, which was a kind of warmth that didn't come from fire but from depth. From weight. From the steady enormous patient presence of something that had existed longer than fear and would continue to exist longer than everything Harry had ever been afraid of. It settled in his chest, right next to where that door had been. Not inside the door. Alongside it. Like a second heartbeat, slower than his own, patient and vast and entirely, absolutely permanent. Then Naga uncoiled further, and further, and further, more of it than should have been there, more snake than space, and it moved toward Harry with a grace that made the word graceful sound like an insult, and when its great head came to rest against Harry's hand, where he'd instinctively held his palm flat without quite knowing why, the contact was electric. Not painful. Just immediate and total and real, the way the first breath of outside air is real after you've been inside too long, a rush of something living and ancient and absolutely certain. Harry felt it in his blood. He felt it in his bones. He felt it in a mark on his forehead, which blazed sudden and white-hot for exactly 1 second before going cold, colder than it had ever been, colder than anything, and then the scar on his forehead did something it had never done before. It went quiet. Not just the occasional phantom ache. Not just the silence between episodes. The noise he had never known was there, the low, constant, background static of something foreign living in his scar, something that watched and pressed and occasionally hurt, stopped. Like a radio finally turned off after years of being just loud enough to affect the room. Harry put his free hand against his forehead. Yes, Grim said, quietly. That thing in your scar has been there since the night you survived. It is a fragment of something that does not understand death because it was so desperate to avoid it that it tore itself into pieces. The realm of the dead does not forget a debt. It is aware of that fragment. It is aware of you. They cannot coexist in you the same way they could before tonight. What does that mean? Harry asked. It means, Naga said, that what was in that scar is now significantly less comfortable than it was. Good, Harry said flatly. Naga made a sound in his mind that was, unmistakably, a laugh. Not the warm kind. The old kind, dry and satisfied, like the sound of something ancient being pleasantly surprised. The green light faded. The cold receded to a background hum. Grim settled back into the shape of a dog, or the shape of something that was choosing, for now, to look like a dog, and his smoky edges solidified into something that was at least mostly visible, though the silver eyes still glowed and his size was still deeply, magnificently impractical for a cupboard under the stairs. Naga coiled, and the coil shrank as it went, tighter and more compact, smaller, until the ancient basilisk was the size of a large house snake, something that could, and did, wind up Harry's arm and settle around his shoulders like a living scarf, which should have been terrifying and was instead the most comfortable Harry had felt in recent memory. Can I ask something? Harry said. You can always ask us anything, Grim said. Will they see you? Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. Will they see you? A pause. Grim's silver eyes moved toward the cupboard door. What do you want? Harry thought about it. He thought about Uncle Vernon's thick red hand around his arm. He thought about Aunt Petunia's voice, sharp and precise as a pin, saying freak with the particular pleasure of someone who had been waiting a long time to say a word to someone who couldn't argue back. He thought about Dudley's feet, deliberately landing on the back of Harry's calves on the school run. He thought about all of it with the careful, complete memory of a child who has learned to document things because no one is documenting them for him. I want them to be afraid, Harry said. Not with heat. With a kind of calm that was new, that was the bond, he realized, that steadiness, that absolute absence of the frantic edge that had always run under everything. Not forever. But I want them to know something changed. I want them to know I'm not the same as I was yesterday. That, Grimm said, is entirely achievable. The cupboard door opened without Harry touching it. He walked out into the hallway of number 4, Privet Drive, with a spectral hound that barely fit between the walls padding silently beside him and an ancient basilisk looped around his shoulders, and the house, which had always been too warm, too loud, too aggressively normal, went very, very quiet. Uncle Vernon was in the kitchen. Harry could hear the refrigerator opening. He walked to the kitchen doorway and stood in it, and when Vernon turned around with a chicken leg in his hand and his mouth already opening to say something automatic and dismissive, he saw what was standing next to his nephew and the chicken leg hit the floor. Vernon Dursley was not a brave man. He was a large man and a loud man and a man who had spent years confusing those qualities with bravery, but faced with something that had silver eyes like the eyes of the dead and stood taller than his shoulder and was made partly of the kind of dark that has no light source to cast it, he went the color of old paper and stumbled backward into the refrigerator. "I want a glass of water," Harry said, conversationally. "And some bread. And I'd like to sleep in the smallest bedroom upstairs instead of the cupboard, starting tonight." Vernon's mouth moved. No sound came out. "I believe he's agreeing," Naga said, in the dry private voice of their bond. "I thought so too," Harry said. Petunia appeared in the kitchen doorway in her bathrobe, drawn by the sound of the refrigerator being hit, and her face went through several expressions very quickly: outrage, confusion, and then something that Harry had never seen on Petunia Dursley's face before and that he recognized only because it was so familiar from the inside. Fear. Real fear. The kind that isn't dramatic, that doesn't scream, that just goes very still and very pale and very aware that it is not in control of what happens next. She looked at Harry. She looked at Grimm. She looked at Naga, coiled around Harry's small shoulders with golden eyes half-lidded and ancient and absolutely unbothered. She looked back at Harry. "What," she said, in barely a sound, "is that?" "Mine," Harry said simply. The refrigerator was humming. The television was still going in the other room, a laugh track on something Dudley was watching, a sound from a completely different universe. Harry watched his aunt and uncle recalibrate, watched them do the rapid, panicked arithmetic of people who have been doing terrible things to someone they've managed to convince themselves couldn't fight back, and who are suddenly confronted with evidence that they may have miscalculated. Grimm hadn't growled. Hadn't threatened. Hadn't done anything except exist at Harry's side with the patient, enormous, absolute certainty of something that doesn't need to threaten because there is no version of events in which it loses. And that, Harry was learning, was far more frightening than any threat could have been. "The bedroom," Harry said. "Tonight." Petunia nodded. It was very small. It was very fast. But it was a nod. Harry got his water and his bread, and he went upstairs, and the bedroom that had always been a storage room was cleared out within 40 minutes with the particular efficiency of two people who are extremely motivated, and Harry lay down on a real bed, dusty, not great, but real, and looked at the ceiling while Grimm settled at the foot of the bed, too large and too present and too real, and Naga uncoiled from his shoulders and draped across the pillow beside him, and the house was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. "Thank you," Harry said, to the dark. "Sleep," Grimm said. "Tomorrow is the beginning of a different thing." "And," Naga added, "I have much to teach you. We will start with languages." "Languages?" Harry said. "You are the lord of the realm of beasts. Every living thing speaks. You will learn to listen." A pause. "You will also need to understand what you are, historically speaking, which involves a significant amount of information about magical theory, political structures, bloodline inheritance, and the rather embarrassing way in which your civilization forgot it was only 600 years old and began acting as though it invented the concept of magic." "That sounds like a lot," Harry said. "It is a great deal," Naga agreed, unperturbed. "Good thing you have time." Harry closed his eyes. The scar on his forehead was quiet for the first time in his memory. Somewhere in his chest, the three-way rhythm of the bond moved like breathing, his own quick heartbeat and Grimm's deep slow one and Naga's almost geological patience, all three settling into something that wasn't quite unison but was better than unison. Was harmony. He was 4 years old and he had been hungry and hurt and forgotten. He was 4 years old and he had opened a door. He was 4 years old and in the morning the world would be different, and he did not know yet all the ways in which that was true, but Grimm's weight at the foot of his bed was real and Naga's warmth beside his head was real and the silence in his scar was real and real was, for a child who had spent 4 years learning to doubt his own experience, everything. Outside, number 4, Privet Drive looked exactly the same as every other house on the street. Same curtains. Same tidy lawn. Same mailbox. Inside, things were fundamentally, permanently different. And in the cupboard under the stairs, the spiders, the 3 Harry had named, went about their quiet business in the dark, and none of them noticed that the cold was gone, or that the particular ambient misery that had lived in the walls of that house had shifted, retreated, been replaced by something it had never encountered before and didn't know how to stay near. Something that felt, even in its earliest and smallest form, like sovereignty. Like a boy who had stopped waiting to be allowed to exist. Like the very first breath of something that would one day make the entire wizarding world stop, reconsider, and understand, too late, probably, the way understanding always comes a little late, that the weapon they had planned to use against their darkness had never been a weapon at all. Had never been theirs. Had always, from the very first opening of a door in a dark cupboard, belonged only to itself. Harry slept. The house held its breath around him. Somewhere far away, in a castle beside a lake, in an office full of sleeping portraits and mechanical silver instruments, one of those instruments, a small spinning thing that had been calibrated to monitor a specific magical signature, began to spin faster than it ever had. In a high-backed chair behind the desk, an old man with half-moon glasses and an extraordinary amount of patience looked at it for a long time. Then he took off his glasses, pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, and said, very softly, to no one in particular, "Oh, my." Chapter 2, The Education of a Lord. The first lesson Naga gave Harry was not about magic. It was about listening. They were in the back garden of number 4, Privet Drive, on a grey October morning 2 weeks after the night of the bond, and Harry was sitting cross-legged in the damp grass while Aunt Petunia watched from the kitchen window with the expression of someone who has decided that seeing is preferable to not seeing, even when what you're seeing makes no sense. She'd been doing that a lot lately, watching, recalibrating, staying quiet. So had Vernon. It was a marked improvement over what came before. "I'm listening," Harry said. "You are hearing," Naga said, from where he'd coiled in the grass beside him, head raised, golden eyes patient. "Those are not the same thing. A fence post hears the wind. Listening requires intention. Reach out. Not with your ears. With the part of you that opened the door." Harry had spent 2 weeks learning where that part of him lived. It was easier now, not like finding a door anymore but like finding a room he'd memorized, something he could step into without fumbling for the frame. He reached. The garden opened up. That was the only way to describe it. One moment it was a tidy suburban backyard with Petunia's rose bushes and Vernon's shed and the lawn that had to be edged to exactly the right height or the neighbors would talk. The next moment it was alive in a way that the word alive didn't fully capture, every blade of grass its own small intention, the earthworms below him moving with purpose, the birds in the hedgerow arguing about territory in a language made of sharp specific sounds that Harry suddenly, astonishingly, understood. Not perfectly. Not like English. More like music, he got the shape of it, the emotion, the meaning, without getting the individual words. The robin in the hedge was furious about something. The 2 sparrows on the fence were discussing food sources with the intensity of 2 people arguing about real estate. Below him, the earth was full of movement and intention and a deep, slow conversation that had been going on since before the house was built. "Oh," Harry said softly. "Yes," Naga said, with the satisfaction of a very old teacher watching a very quick student connect something important. "That is the realm of beasts. Not power. Not dominion. First and always, relationship. You cannot command what you don't understand. You cannot lead what you haven't listened to. They don't seem dangerous, Harry said, about the sparrows. They are not, Naga agreed. But a basilisk once seemed merely a large snake to the wrong people. And a black dog is merely an omen to those who haven't met one. Scale matters less than nature, and nature requires patience to understand. A beat. You will make mistakes. That is acceptable. What is not acceptable is making the same mistake twice. From the shed, Grim watched. He spent a lot of time doing that, watching, present, a vast and steady gravity at the edges of Harry's awareness through the bond. He was teaching too, but Grim's lessons came differently, not in morning sessions in the garden but in the hours after dark when Harry lay awake and Grim would simply show him things. Not visions, exactly. More like memories that weren't Harry's, experiences pressed gently into the connective tissue of the bond, and Harry would absorb them the way you absorb rain. The realm of the dead was like learning a second language from someone who'd spoken it before you were born. Harry couldn't walk there yet, that would come later, Grim said, when he was older and the bond had deepened, but he could feel its edges. The way the living world had a kind of background noise to it, busy and insistent, the realm of the dead had a background quiet. Not silence. Quiet. The distinction mattered. Silence was absence. The quiet of the dead was the particular quality of things that had finished rushing and found out, on the other side of the finish line, that there was nothing to rush toward and had settled into something vast and unhurried and absolutely, fundamentally okay. Harry found it comforting in a way that would probably have worried any adult who knew about it. Most humans fear death, Grim told him, one night in November, the first frost on the window. They fear it so completely that their entire civilization is organized around pretending it isn't coming. Your kind built magic in large part to run from it. The Philosopher's Stone. The Hallows. Every immortality scheme ever conceived. All of them, fundamentally, a child with their eyes shut insisting the dark isn't there. But the dark is there, Harry said. The dark is there, Grim confirmed. And it is not what they think. I have run at its side for a very long time, Harry. Death is not cruel. It is not kind. It is not a punishment. It is a door, the same as the one you opened in that cupboard. And on the other side of it is not nothing, it is everything that came before, settled and still and held. The dead are not lost. They are simply elsewhere. My parents, Harry said. A pause. Grim's silver eyes moved to him with careful, complete attention. They are elsewhere, Grim said. Held. Not suffering. Not waiting in anguish. They are, the pause stretched, deliberate and honest, aware that you exist and are becoming something worth watching. Harry turned that over for a long time. Okay, he said, eventually. Not dismissively. With the same finality as the night of the bond, okay meaning I have received this, I have placed it where it needs to go, I will continue. Grim watched him with those silver coin eyes and said nothing, which was itself a kind of answer. The months accumulated. Harry turned 5, then 6, and the Dursleys had settled into a new arrangement with the particular exhausted practicality of people who have been defeated and know it and have decided that the most dignified response is to simply restructure their expectations and never speak of the restructuring. Harry got regular meals. Harry got his own room. Harry was not grabbed, or squeezed, or locked away. Dudley kept his distance with the instinctive animal awareness of a child who has recognized, somewhere below thought, that the thing standing next to his cousin is the reason you don't touch the cousin. Vernon attempted, twice, to assert that this was his house and he would not be dictated to by a child and a couple of abnormal creatures, and both times Grim simply appeared in the kitchen doorway with those silver eyes in the darkness and Vernon found he had nothing further to say on the subject. It wasn't that Harry was cruel about it. He didn't take pleasure in their fear, exactly. It was more that he understood it as a natural consequence of natural law, cause and effect, action and response, and he had moved on from any impulse to apologize for it. They had made their choices. He had made his. The arithmetic was simple. He was 7 when he first spoke to the spiders. Not just felt the shape of them, not just the emotion and intent, but actual Parseltongue extended across the gap into the particular vibrational language of arachnids, which Naga said was technically a separate tongue from serpent speech but close enough in structure that Harry's training made the leap natural. He sat in the corner of the garden near Vernon's shed and held his palm flat, and a garden spider walked onto it with all the careful deliberate dignity of something that knew exactly what it was doing, and Harry said, very carefully, in the slow guttural music of beast speech, "You are the one who spun the web near the rose bush." The spider paused. Then it said, in the way spiders say things, which was vibration and pattern and a kind of chemical communication that Harry's bond translated into something his brain could use, "Yes. That is my web. You are the loud inside one." The loud inside one? Harry repeated, out loud and in English, momentarily thrown. Children who have been very afraid for a long time, Naga explained, from his usual post near Harry's knee, carry a particular energetic quality. Most creatures can detect it. Not fear exactly. More like the echo of it. You were very loud with that echo when you were small. Am I still? No, Naga said, simply. Now you are something else entirely. Something most creatures find, a fractional pause, interesting. The spider on Harry's palm seemed to agree. It spun a small, perfect circle of web and left it there before walking calmly back into the grass, and Harry stared at the tiny silk circle in his hand and thought about being loud inside and then being something interesting instead, and felt the bond move in his chest like a slow tide responding to the moon. He was 8 when he first felt a presence in his scar again. It wasn't like before, not the constant background static, not something settled and resident. This was more like a probe, deliberate and external, something from very far away pushing at the scar the way you push at a door to test whether it's locked. Harry woke up at 3 in the morning with his hand already at his forehead and Grim standing over him with silver eyes blazing and Naga alert and tight-coiled with every scale precisely arranged. "Don't fight it," Grim said, immediately. "Let me." What followed was something Harry felt more than understood, Grim's presence in the bond moving to the scar, not blocking the probe but meeting it, and the quality of what came back through the contact was like slamming a door in someone's face in the dark. A recoil. A shock. And then, distantly, something that Harry could only describe as confusion, the particular confusion of something that had been absolutely certain it knew what it would find and found something else entirely. The probe vanished. Harry was breathing harder than he should have been from just lying in bed. What was that? The fragment, Grim said. Or rather, the larger piece of the thing the fragment belongs to. It has been reaching periodically, testing whether the fragment is still available. It is becoming aware that something has changed. Does it know what? Harry asked. Not yet, Grim said. But it will work it out. Things like that are not stupid. They are merely incomplete. And incomplete things with great power and no wisdom are dangerous in a specific way, they cannot be reasoned with, only redirected. Or ended, Naga said, with a flatness that made the word land exactly as heavy as it was. Yes, Grim said. Or ended. Harry lay back on his pillow and looked at the ceiling and felt 8 years old and absolutely certain that this was information he was supposed to have, that Grim and Naga had not told him this to frighten him but to arm him, and the difference between those two things was everything. He wasn't frightened. He sorted through the feeling carefully, oriented. Like someone had just told him the exact direction of something he'd already half known was out there. Okay, he said. You keep saying that, Naga observed. Because I keep meaning it, Harry said. The summer before Harry's 9th birthday, Grim began the real work on the realm of the dead. They did it in the back garden at midnight when the Dursleys were asleep, Harry sitting in the grass with Grim before him and Naga on his shoulders, and the first thing Grim taught him was not how to enter the realm but how to recognize those who were moving toward it. Every living thing had what Harry eventually started calling a thread, a connection to the realm of the dead that ran through it the way a river runs through landscape, present whether you looked at it or not, and the thread's quality told you things. Most threads were loose and easy and long, indicating someone or something with plenty of life left and no particular urgency. Some threads were tighter, shorter, fraying at the edges with age or sickness. And some were so thin as to be nearly translucent, indicating a life that was on the very edge of its crossing. "You will not touch those threads," Grimm said. "Not yet. Not until you understand what they are. To touch a life thread without understanding is to risk fraying what should not fray and tightening what should not tighten. You are learning. Learning requires observation before action." "Can I see my own thread?" Harry asked. A pause. "Yes," Grimm said. "But I must tell you something about it first. Your thread is unusual. Because of the scar?" "Partly. The scar has created an anomaly. Your thread is doubled. Most lives have one thread to the realm of the dead. Yours has two, your own, which is strong and deep and long, and a second one which belongs to the fragment and which is parasitic. It feeds from yours. It has been doing so since the night of your scar." Harry was quiet for a moment. "Can it be cut?" "Not yet. When you are ready, when the bond is deep enough, yes. But cutting it incorrectly would damage your own thread, and that is not acceptable." "Not acceptable," Harry repeated. "You make it sound like a scheduling conflict." "I make it sound like something I will not allow," Grimm said, with a quiet finality that closed the subject completely and wrapped it in the absolute immovable certainty of something older than mountains. "You are not dying to solve someone else's problem. That is a non-negotiation." Harry felt the bond pulse with it, Naga's answering coil of agreement, tight and total, and Grimm's vast steady warmth pushing through the connection like sunlight through deep water, and something in Harry's chest unlocked a little further, something he hadn't known was still locked, some last small guarded room that had been waiting to see whether this was real before it opened, and what was in it was grief and relief in equal measure, the grief of a child who had needed exactly this for a very long time and had not had it, and the relief of that same child finally, permanently, having it. He didn't cry. He was 9 and had largely forgotten how to cry in the way children cry when they're overwhelmed with feeling rather than pain. But his breath went slightly unsteady for a moment and he put his hand on Grimm's head, on the smoke and dark solidity of him, and Grimm stayed exactly still under the contact and let Harry's hand rest there for as long as it needed to. Naga said nothing for once, which was its own kind of tenderness. By the time Harry was 10, the arrangement at number 4 had developed its own strange equilibrium. The Dursleys went about their lives with the careful behavior of people living adjacent to a wildlife sanctuary, respectful of the invisible boundary, not particularly happy about it, but not actively trying to cross it either. Dudley had developed an impressive ability to simply not see Harry in any room they occupied together, which was genuinely the best possible outcome for everyone involved. Harry, for his part, had developed the particular self-sufficiency of someone who has been given the tools to build their own interior world and use them well. He was quiet in the house, not the quiet of suppression, not the held-breath quiet of before, but the quiet of someone who doesn't need the room to know they're in it. He read everything he could get to, he'd found the library 6 months after the bond, 3 bus stops away, and had become the kind of regular patron that librarians develop opinions about, and the opinions in Harry's case were uniformly excellent because he read everything and returned it on time and occasionally left brief notes in the margins that other patrons would find later and think about for days. He read mythology. He read natural history. He read everything he could find about ancient magical traditions, which in non-magical libraries mostly meant folklore and anthropology and the occasional academic text that didn't know it was describing real things. He read about death traditions across cultures and recognized in all of them the fingerprints of the realm, the moments when someone had been close enough to feel the truth of it and had translated it into story. He read about serpent worship and recognized the echo of Naga in every sacred snake from every tradition, the deep cellular memory of something humanity had been close to once and had half forgotten. You read quickly, Naga noted, one afternoon, watching Harry move through a book on ancient Mesopotamian mythology at the kitchen table. "You taught me," Harry said, without looking up. "I taught you beast speech and parseltongue and how to listen to things that don't use words. Reading speed is apparently just you." "I've had a lot of practice," Harry said, which was true. Reading had been the primary entertainment available in the cupboard under the stairs, and the library book he'd managed to get Aunt Petunia to take out for him on her card, a children's encyclopedia of animals, had been read and reread until the spine cracked. Grim was outside. Harry could feel him through the bond, the vast patient presence ranging somewhere between the house and the edge of the neighborhood, doing whatever Grim did when he was ranging, which Harry understood as something like checking the local threads, reading the realm's edge, keeping a particular kind of watch over the borders between states of being that only Grim could perceive. Harry finished his chapter and looked at the window. What was the wizarding world like when it was new? Naga's golden eyes moved to him with something that was almost nostalgic, which on an ancient basilisk was a fascinating expression to observe. Noisier. More honest. The magic was wilder then, not better, not worse, but less categorized. Your kind had not yet decided that everything needed to be understood before it could be used. There was more chaos, which meant more danger, and also more, a pause, wonder. The walls between the realms were thinner. Creatures like myself moved more freely. The dead were not hidden behind euphemism. What happened? Progress, Naga said, with a tone that managed to make the word sound like a diagnosis. Institutions. The building of systems. Which are not inherently bad. Systems allow complexity, allow larger social structures, allow specialization. But every system eventually begins to serve itself rather than its purpose. Your Ministry of Magic is 400 years old and has forgotten, comprehensively, what magic is for. It now exists primarily to regulate and record and argue about precedent. It has turned something alive into something administered. You sound like you've thought about this a lot, Harry said. I have had 4,000 years of extremely limited social interaction, Naga said. One develops opinions. Harry smiled at his book. And the school? Hogwarts. Hogwarts, Naga said, and the word in his mind had a different quality, a different weight, something that was not quite fondness but was adjacent to it, the way you feel about a place that was once great and has become merely good and you remember what great looked like. Hogwarts was built on old ground. The magic in those stones is older than the founders who laid them. The castle existed as a place of power before it was a school. The founders understood that, at least partially. They built with and not merely on. And what they built has awareness. Of a kind. The castle is alive? Harry asked. Aware, Naga corrected. There is a difference. It does not think in the way you think. It thinks the way old forests think, which is very slowly and very broadly and in patterns that take centuries to complete. It will know you when you arrive. Will it like me? A genuine pause. Naga appeared to be considering the castle's probable reaction to Harry as a complete and honest question. I believe, he said eventually, that it will find you deeply interesting. Whether that constitutes liking remains to be seen. The castle's preferences are its own. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in July, exactly 1 year before Harry was to turn 11. Not the Hogwarts letter, that would come the following year. This was something else. A plain envelope, no stamp, that arrived not through the mail slot but simply appeared on the kitchen table, and when Harry opened it there was a single piece of parchment inside that read, in handwriting that was precise and slightly archaic, I am aware that something has changed. I would very much like to speak with Harry Potter, at his earliest convenience. Albus Dumbledore, headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry read it twice. Set it down. Looked at Naga, who had read it over his shoulder with the expression of someone who has been expecting a particular piece of mail for some time. No, Harry said. Just no. Naga asked. Not yet, Harry said. He wants to speak with me on his timeline because something changed and it scared him. That's not a conversation I'm having on his terms. He picked up the letter and held it for a moment, feeling the faint trace of magic in the parchment, old magic, skilled magic, and underneath it the very particular quality of something calibrated and deliberate, a letter designed to be hard to refuse. He recognized the technique without the vocabulary for it yet. A nudge. I would very much like to speak with you, not a request, not a demand, but something between them, something that relied on the recipient's good manners to function. Harry set the letter down and went back to his book. Grim, who had come in from outside at some point during this exchange, settled beside the table and said nothing, though the quality of his silence was deeply, richly approving. The second letter came a month later. More direct. I understand you may be cautious. That is wise. I want only to ensure your well-being and to introduce myself, as I believe we have more than a little to discuss. Harry wrote back, for the first time, in careful neat 10-year-old handwriting on a piece of notebook paper, I'm well. Thank you for asking. I'll speak with you at Hogwarts when I arrive. He addressed it to Albus Dumbledore, Hogwarts, Scotland, and gave it to the barn owl that had been sitting on the garden fence since the second letter arrived. The owl took it with the slight air of offense that barn owls maintain about most things and left. That was precisely right, Grim said. He'll try again, Harry said. Undoubtedly. He is persistent in the way that all truly convinced people are persistent. He believes he is acting in your interest. Is he? He is acting in the interest of his plan, Grim said, which includes you as a component. Whether that aligns with your interest is a question you will have to answer as you learn more about what his plan is. He wants me to die, Harry said, matter-of-factly. He'd worked this out slowly, over months, as Grim had explained the scar and the fragment and the bond and what all of it meant in terms of the larger pattern. He said it not with bitterness but with the calm of someone who has examined a situation from all angles and arrived at a conclusion they're not going to argue with the evidence about. He wants, Grim said carefully, the fragment destroyed. He has concluded, based on very limited information and a great deal of very confident inference, that the fragment cannot be destroyed without destroying the vessel it currently occupies alongside its host. He has been preparing you, in his way, to accept that conclusion. He does not know about us. He does not know that the situation is more complex than his instruments showed him. He thinks I'm going to have to die to kill Voldemort, Harry said. Yes. He's wrong. Yes. But he doesn't know that yet. No. And, Grim added, I would prefer he continue not knowing it until the moment when his knowing it no longer affects the outcome. Dumbledore is a man of extraordinary intelligence and genuine moral commitment who is also deeply, perhaps fatally, convinced that he is the most qualified person in the room to make the large decisions. That combination is dangerous in a specific way. He'll try to manage me, Harry said. He will spend considerable energy attempting to guide you toward a destination he has already mapped without your input, Grim said. He will do it with kindness and warmth and the genuine belief that he is preparing you for something necessary. And you will need to navigate that without becoming hostile, because hostility will make him tighten his grip, and without becoming compliant, because compliance will confirm his assumptions. Harry thought about this for a long moment. So I need to let him think he has some idea of what I am while actually being something else entirely. You need to be yourself, Grim said. Simply, entirely. Without apology. That will be disorienting enough for him without any strategy on your part. The Hogwarts letter arrived on Harry's 11th birthday, July 31st, and it was delivered not by one owl but by 17, which was apparently what happened when a Hogwarts letter was sent to an address that had been refusing all previous wizarding correspondence, and all 17 owls arrived at 6 in the morning and made a tremendous noise, and Uncle Vernon appeared at the top of the stairs in his bathrobe and saw 17 owls on his window sills and went back to his bedroom and shut the door very firmly. Harry took the letters from the owls, gave each one a piece of toast from his breakfast, and opened the top letter. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He read the supply list. Robes, cauldrons, wands, books. He read the instructions for Diagon Alley. He put the letter down on the kitchen table and looked at the window where the owls were dispersing in a flurry of wings into the morning sky, and then he looked at Naga, coiled on the table beside his toast, and he looked toward the door where Grim sat, and something settled in him, not excitement, which he'd read about in books, not the giddy shaky anticipation that other children probably felt about beginnings. Something older and steadier and more satisfied. "Next month," he said. "Next month," Naga agreed. "It begins," Grim said. Harry ate his toast and read the supply list again and listened to the sparrows in the garden arguing about territory and thought about a castle on a lake that had been aware for 1,000 years and was, possibly, already thinking slowly about the fact that something interesting was coming. He didn't mind being interesting. He'd been loud inside once, afraid inside, small inside. He'd been a child in a cupboard trying not to exist too loudly in case existence annoyed someone. That was done. He was 11 years old and lord of 3 realms, and he had been educated by a death hound and an ancient basilisk for 7 years, and in 1 month he was going to walk into the wizarding world that had been watching him with a mixture of pity and expectation for as long as it had known his name. He wondered what they were expecting. He suspected they were going to be surprised. Chapter 3, The Wizard Meets the World. Diagon Alley smelled like old parchment and something burning sweet, like caramel left too long on a hot pan, and underneath both of those things it smelled like magic, the real kind, not the kind in books, which Harry had suspected had a smell even before he'd known what magic was. He stepped through the leaky cauldron's back entrance, through the archway that opened at the touch of a wand, except Harry hadn't touched it with a wand, he'd touched it with his bare hand, and the bricks had moved anyway, faster than they probably should have, with a kind of eagerness that made the landlord's jaw drop, and stood on the cobblestones of Diagon Alley for the first time and just looked. It was loud and narrow and full of color, shop signs jostling each other for attention over the heads of the crowd, robes of every shade moving between storefronts, owls in cages and cats on leashes and a cart selling something that steamed purple. A group of children Harry's age were pressed against the window of a broom shop pointing and arguing about specifications with the intensity of people who had never experienced doubt about what mattered. Loud, Naga observed, from where he was coiled beneath Harry's collar, his warmth against Harry's neck a familiar constant. Many living things in one place, Grim confirmed, in his background presence in the bond. He wasn't physically here, not visibly, but he ran alongside Harry in the realm's edge the way he always did in crowded places, present and watchful without being visible to the general public, which was a mercy given what visible Grim did to the average person's composure. "Gringotts first," Harry said, mostly to himself, and started walking. The crowd moved interestingly around him. Harry had noticed this before, animals did it, always, giving him that extra degree of space that wasn't quite deference and wasn't quite avoidance but was some instinctive acknowledgement of something they couldn't name. The wizarding crowd did the same, though they didn't know they were doing it, people just slightly unconsciously finding reasons to step aside, adjust their trajectory, give him room. A witch with a stack of boxes nearly walked into him and then didn't, at the last moment, with a vague apologetic look that suggested she wasn't quite sure why she'd moved. Naga found this quietly hilarious. Gringotts was white marble and goblin run and smelled like cold stone and old money, and the goblins watched Harry's approach with the particular attentiveness of beings who deal in value and have learned to recognize it in forms that don't always look impressive from the outside. Harry walked to the nearest teller and looked up at the goblin, who looked down at him with the expression of someone who has processed 10,000 human children and expects nothing remarkable. "I'd like to access my vault," Harry said. "Harry Potter." The goblin's eyes sharpened. Just slightly. The way a scale tips when something heavier than expected lands on it. "Identification," the goblin said. Harry pressed his hand flat against the counter. The marble under his palm glowed, briefly, with 3 distinct colors, green, silver, and a deep amber that had no name in any color Will Harry had seen, and the goblin stared at it for a moment longer than professionalism strictly required. "That," the goblin said carefully, "is not a standard identification response." "No," Harry agreed. "You are Harry Potter." Yes. And those 3 resonances, the goblin stopped. Reconsidered. In the way of beings who value precision, chose to ask the exact question rather than the adjacent one. What are you, Mr. Potter? Lord of the 3 realms, Harry said, without drama, without performance, the way you state your address. I'd like to see my vault. The goblin was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then it said, with a new quality in its voice that wasn't quite respect but was its close professional cousin, I'll need to speak with the account manager. Please follow me. The account manager was an older goblin named Ragnarok who had the eyes of something that had been measuring human worth for several centuries and was not easily impressed, and who looked at Harry across an enormous desk covered in ledgers and artifacts and what appeared to be a small dragon skull, and said, without preamble, the Potter account has been in trust since 1981. Managed under the authority of Albus Dumbledore per the terms of guardianship. I'm revoking that, Harry said. Ragnarok looked at him. You are 11. I'm Lord of the 3 realms, Harry said. Which in goblin law, and here he paused, because Naga had briefed him on this, patient and thorough, in the weeks before this visit, supersedes the age of magical majority provisions under the secondary estate management clause of the 1689 Goblin Wizard Accord. I believe section 14, paragraph 3. A silence that was almost perfectly still. Then Ragnarok smiled, and it was the kind of smile that goblins do which involves a great many teeth and is not entirely comfortable to observe but is, unmistakably, genuine. You have done your reading, Mr. Potter. I had a good teacher, Harry said. Several, Naga corrected, privately. The vault visit took 3 hours, which was 2.5 hours longer than Harry had planned, because it turned out the Potter account was considerably more complex than a simple family trust. There were properties, investments, political holdings that Harry hadn't known existed, and a secondary vault, older, deeper, that held things that predated the modern Potter family by centuries and that had a lock on it that responded not to a key or a ward but to the 3-realm resonance that had lit up the marble counter an hour ago. When that vault opened, the goblins who had accompanied Harry took an involuntary step back, because what the vault contained was old in a way that Gringotts itself was not old in a way that made the air around the open door taste like the back edge of the world. Harry walked in and looked at the contents carefully, and Naga moved on his shoulder with a focused attention, and Grim hummed very quietly through the bond in a way that said yes, this is yours, this has always been yours, artifacts and texts and a seal in stone that bore 3 marks that Harry recognized from somewhere deeper than memory. He took the seal. He took a particular journal that Naga indicated with a precise movement of his head. He left everything else undisturbed. I'll be back, he told Ragnarok. We will be ready, Ragnarok said, which from a Gringotts goblin was approximately equivalent to a standing ovation. The wand shop was called Ollivander's, and it smelled like wood shavings and something electric, and the man inside it, old, silver-eyed, with the quality of someone who has been in a small space with concentrated power for so long that they've become slightly compressed, looked at Harry when he walked in and went very still. Harry Potter, Ollivander said. Mr. Ollivander, Harry said pleasantly. I wondered when you'd come. He moved down the narrow shop with the fluid certainty of someone who knows exactly where everything is. I have been thinking about your wand for some time. Since the night, but you know the story. I know a version of it, Harry said. Ollivander paused. Looked at him with those silver eyes. Yes, he said, slowly. I suppose you do. He pulled a box from the shelf. Your father's wand was mahogany, 11 inches. Your mother's, willow, 10 1/4. The one connected to your story, is 13.5 inches, you, phoenix feather. The brother wand to yours, in a sense. Holly, 11 inches. Phoenix feather. He held out the box. Try this first. Harry took the holly wand and held it, and the wand maker and the wand seemed to wait for the shower of sparks that traditionally marked a match, and nothing happened, not because there was no reaction, but because what the wand was doing was not producing sparks. It was humming, a low sustained resonance that Harry felt more than heard, and the color that drifted from the tip was not the usual warm gold or silver but that same tricolor glow, green and silver and amber. Ollivander stared at the wand in Harry's hand for a long moment. "That's not holly," Ollivander said, which was factually untrue because it was absolutely holly, but what he meant was what the wand was doing was not holly behavior, or any wand behavior he had observed in his extremely long career. "The phoenix feather. The feather in your wand and the feather in his wand both came from the same bird. I thought that meant one thing. I am now re-evaluating whether I was thinking about it correctly." "What do you think now?" Harry asked, genuinely curious. "I think," Ollivander said, "that the phoenix chose those feathers for a reason I didn't fully understand, and that the reason may be more to do with resonance. Completion. The two wands as two ends of the same sentence." He paused. "And I think your wand has just met its owner and is doing something wands are not supposed to be able to do." "What's that?" Harry asked. "Expanding," Ollivander said. "The core. There's more of it than there was." As though the feather always knew it would need to accommodate more than one kind of magic and was waiting for the right hands before it grew into its full length. He was quiet for a moment, watching. "7 years I've been thinking about your wand. I expected interesting. This is, considerably beyond interesting." Harry paid for the wand. 7 galleons. He counted them out carefully from his new coin purse and Ollivander took them with the slightly dazed expression of a man who has just had a fundamental professional assumption rearranged and isn't sure whether to be troubled or thrilled. "He'll tell Dumbledore," Naga said, when they were back on the cobblestones. "I know," Harry said. "Let him. You're not concerned. Dumbledore already knows something changed. Telling him that my wand did something unusual adds one more data point to a picture he's already drawing incorrectly. An incorrect picture doesn't become more correct just because there are more details in it." Naga was quiet for a moment. "That," he said, "is genuinely excellent strategic thinking." "I had a good teacher," Harry said again. "I keep telling myself that," Naga said, with a satisfaction he didn't bother to conceal. The bookshop took the rest of the afternoon. Harry bought all the required texts and then spent another 40 minutes in the back section where the older volumes lived, buying 3 books on preministry magical theory and one on beast language traditions that Naga identified as actually accurate, which he said was a notable achievement for a human-authored text. He emerged into the late afternoon with his bags and his wand and the particular feeling of someone who has been somewhere they've been working toward for a long time and found it smaller and larger than expected in different ways. He passed the broom shop on the way back. The children who'd been there before were gone. Through the window, a Nimbus 2000 gleamed on its display stand, and Harry looked at it with the mild appreciation of someone who recognizes craft without having particular feelings about it. Then he saw the girl. She was standing outside Flourish and Blots with her arms full of books, more books than arms could reasonably hold, stacked with the architectural ambition of someone who had significantly underestimated the number they intended to buy and significantly overestimated their ability to carry them all, and she was making a determined and clearly losing battle against the structural integrity of the pile, and just as Harry drew level with her, the bottom 3 books slid out and hit the cobblestones with a sound like small indoor thunderclaps. She said something under her breath that was definitely a word she'd read in a book and tried out for the first time, and then she crouched to pick them up, and Harry crouched opposite her and picked up 2 of the fallen books and held them out. She looked up. Brown eyes, enormous in a sharp face, brown hair that had decided at some point to pursue its own agenda entirely independent of any styling ambitions. She looked at Harry with the assessing speed of someone who makes determinations quickly and with confidence. "Thank you," she said, taking the books. "Then, you've got too many bags, also." "I know," Harry said. "I'm Hermione Granger," she said, because she was clearly the kind of person who introduced herself immediately and expected it to accomplish something. "Harry Potter," Harry said. She looked at him. Really looked at him, the focused attention of someone who has read about something and is now updating the mental image in real time. Her eyes moved to his forehead for exactly 1 second and then came back to his face with the disciplined deliberateness of someone who has decided that the polite thing to do is to look at the person and not the famous scar. "I know who you are," she said. "Everyone knows who you are. Are you starting Hogwarts this year?" "Yes," Harry said. "Me too. I've read all the textbooks already. 3 times. The history of magic is absolutely fascinating. Did you know the ministry's founding in 1707 actually represented a significant regression in several areas of magical practice? The pre-ministry traditions were far more." She stopped. "Sorry. I do that. Go on too long about things." "No," Harry said. "The ministry's founding was a regression." "You're right." She blinked. "You know about that?" "I've been reading about it," Harry said, which was true. Specifically, the way the standardization of wand magic effectively suppressed about 40% of pre-existing magical practices by not including them in the approved curriculum. Hermione stared at him. Her books were very still in her arms. "I haven't found a source that says 40% specifically. It's in Villeneuve's Comparative Magical Histories, 1743 edition. The calculation is in the appendix. It's not widely cited because the ministry banned the book in 1819. A pause. "I didn't know that book existed," she said, with the specific tone of someone who finds the existence of a book they don't own to be a personal affront. "I'll write down the title for you," Harry said. Something shifted in Hermione Granger's face. It was subtle, a recalibration, a reclassification, the particular realignment that happens when you encounter something that doesn't fit any existing category and have to build a new one. She was smart enough to know she was doing it. Harry could see that in the way her eyes moved. She was also smart enough to decide that the person who knew about banned preministry magical texts and was standing on the cobblestones of Diagon Alley with a very unusual calm for an 11-year-old meeting the wizarding world for the first time was someone worth knowing more about. "Are you busy?" she said. "I was going to have tea. My parents are in the ice cream shop across the alley." Harry looked at the ice cream shop. Through its window he could see 2 people who were very clearly Hermione's parents in the particular way that some children are very clearly their parents, same sharp attentive eyes, same quality of people who notice things. "Sure," he said. "Mr. and Mrs. Granger were dentists who had discovered 3 months ago that their daughter was a witch, and had responded to this discovery with a combination of deep love and thorough research that Harry found immediately admirable. They asked good questions, not the nervous deflective questions of people trying to be polite about something they found overwhelming, but actual questions, substantive ones, the questions of people who intend to understand something and are willing to revise their understanding when the evidence requires it. They asked Harry how long he'd known about the wizarding world. He told them his whole life, which was true, though he left out the specifics. They asked whether Hogwarts was safe, which was a more complicated question than they knew, and Harry said it was generally safe and would be particularly safe for their daughter, which he meant. They asked about careers in the wizarding world and Harry told them what he knew, which was considerable, and they listened with the focused attention of 2 people who are determined to support something they don't fully understand because their daughter is excited about it and their daughter, it was clear, was the thing they were organized around. Hermione sat across from Harry and ate her ice cream and watched him talk to her parents with an expression he'd see many more times in the future, that calculating, reassessing attention, the one that meant she was updating something fundamental. When the Grangers went to pay, she leaned forward across the small table and said, quietly, "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Harry asked. "The books, the ones that mention you, make you sound like," she considered how to say it, "like a symbol. Something that happened to a person but isn't really about the person themselves. Like the person is almost incidental to their own story." Harry looked at her steadily. "And now?" "Now I think the books are wrong," Hermione said, "which is extremely unusual because I generally find books quite reliable." A pause. "What's around your neck?" Harry looked down. Naga had shifted slightly during the tea, comfortable and warm, and a small section of scale, iridescent green-black, was just visible above his collar. "A friend," Harry said. Hermione opened her mouth and then made the visible decision to table that particular question for later, which told Harry everything he needed to know about her. She was curious, more curious than almost anyone he'd ever met, but she was also disciplined about it. She could hold a question patiently when the timing wasn't right. He thought they were going to be good friends. The train on September 1st was chaos in the best possible sense. Hundreds of children and their parents and their owls and their cats all attempting to simultaneously pass through a barrier that existed between platforms 9 and 10, and the noise of it was tremendous and happy and loud. Harry walked through the barrier alone, because the Dursleys had dropped him at King's Cross with the specific efficiency of people completing a transaction they were relieved to be done with, and emerged onto platform 9 3/4 and stopped for a moment. The Scarlet engine was enormous and very red and steaming at the platform with the self-satisfied grandeur of a vehicle that knows it is iconic. Children swarmed around it. Parents hugged children. Owls protested. A small ginger cat was attempting to escape a cage and 3 different people were trying to prevent it. Harry found a compartment midway down the train, stowed his trunk, sat by the window, and watched the platform. He found Neville Longbottom by accident. Or rather, Neville Longbottom found him, by appearing in the compartment doorway with a round, honest face and the look of someone who had been looking for a place to sit for longer than was comfortable. "Sorry, is it all right if, there aren't many," he stopped. "Start it again. All the other compartments are full or, can I sit here?" "Go ahead," Harry said. Neville Longbottom came in and sat across from Harry with his toad, Trevor, who made an immediate and committed attempt to be somewhere else, and looked at Harry with the particular careful attention of someone who has been told all his life to be careful and is therefore very good at assessing things before committing to a response. "You're Harry Potter," he said, not with excitement or awe but with the quiet certainty of someone stating a fact they've confirmed. "Yes," Harry said. "You're Neville Longbottom." Neville blinked. "How do you, your grandmother talked about you in The Prophet 2 years ago," Harry said. "When you showed accidental magic on the Quidditch pitch. The article was about magical late development in children. I read it." Neville stared at him. "That article was, I didn't know anyone actually read that." "It was interesting," Harry said. "What you did, stopping the broom mid-fall with nothing but accidental magic, the article treated it as a delay in development. I thought it sounded like something else entirely." "What?" Neville asked, carefully. "Something very strong that was waiting for a reason," Harry said. "Not weakness. Patience." Neville was very quiet for a moment. He had the look of someone who has just heard something said to them that they've been trying to say to themselves for a long time in a language they couldn't quite find. "My gran says I'm almost a squib," he said, not bitterly. It had been said to him so many times it had become a fact he carried rather than a wound he tended. "Your gran is wrong," Harry said. Neville looked at him. Not argumentatively. With the careful hope of someone who wants very badly to believe something and is checking whether the source is trustworthy. The compartment door slid open again, and this time it was Draco Malfoy, which Harry knew because he'd done his reading on significant wizarding families and Draco Malfoy looked exactly like a Malfoy should look: platinum hair, precise posture, expensive robes, and the expression of someone who has been told since birth that their arrival is an occasion. He was followed by 2 large boys who had the energy of furniture that had learned to walk. "Potter," Malfoy said, with the specific satisfaction of someone deploying a name as a calling card. "I heard you were on the train. Thought I'd introduce myself. Draco Malfoy." He held out his hand. Harry looked at the hand. He looked at Malfoy. He read the performance of it, the deliberate use of surname first, the framing of the introduction as a favor, the 2 large boys positioned slightly behind and to each side, the whole composition of it designed to establish a hierarchy before anything else had been established. He shook the hand. Malfoy's grip was confident. Harry's was unhurried. "Harry Potter," Harry said. "You already know that. This is Neville Longbottom." Malfoy's eyes moved to Neville with a brief, dismissive quality that Harry noted without comment. Longbottom. Yes. Back to Harry. You'll want to know which families are worth knowing at Hogwarts. The Malfoys have been. I know who the Malfoys are, Harry said, pleasantly. I know the history, the political affiliations, the voting record on the last 6 contested Wisengamot bills. I know about the war. A pause. I know your father's ring has a dark mark on the skin under it. The compartment went absolutely still. Malfoy's grey eyes went wide, then very, very careful, and Harry watched the performance drop away and saw underneath it something much younger and much more real, a boy who had been handed a complete set of certainties like luggage and was now, for perhaps the first time, aware that someone had looked into the suitcase. That's, Malfoy started. I'm not threatening you, Harry said. I'm not telling anyone. I'm making a point, which is that I know considerably more than I'm supposed to know about most things, and the framing device of which families I should value isn't necessary between us. Just talk to me. I'm easy enough to talk to. Another silence. Then Crabbe and Goyle shifted uncomfortably. Malfoy straightened. His grey eyes were doing complicated things. You're strange, Malfoy said, finally. Probably, Harry agreed. Draco Malfoy looked at him for a long moment with an expression that was working out whether strange was bad, and then something shifted in it, the beginning of a recalibration that would take, Harry suspected, considerably longer than a train ride, but was, at minimum, starting. He sat down, uninvited but apparently deciding he would, in the compartment seat. What do you mean, which bills? He said. Hermione arrived 20 minutes later, looking for Harry because she'd found him on the platform and lost him in the boarding rush, and she appeared in the compartment doorway, took in the tableau, Harry, Neville, Draco Malfoy and his bookends, all apparently in the middle of a focused political discussion about pre-war wizarding legislation, and stepped in without hesitation and sat down next to Neville. What are we talking about? She said. The 1978 Pure Blood Protection Acts, Harry said. Oh, I have thoughts about those, Hermione said, and pulled out a notebook. Draco Malfoy stared at her with the expression of someone encountering a phenomenon they have no prior framework for, and Hermione stared back with the expression of someone who has encountered that look many times from many people and has long since stopped finding it relevant. By the time the train reached Hogsmeade it was dark, and the compartment had seen 2 arguments, 1 genuine laughter moment, and at least 3 instances of everyone agreeing on something despite having started from completely different positions, which was unusual for any group of 11-year-olds, magical or otherwise. On the lake crossing, in the small wooden boat, Harry saw Hogwarts for the first time. He'd expected it to be large. He hadn't expected it to be present in the way it was, not just large but aware, the way Naga had described, the way a very old forest is aware, which isn't personal but isn't nothing. The castle sat on its promontory above the Black Lake and its lights were reflected in the water below it and the sky above it was full of stars, and Harry looked at it and felt something move in the bond, all 3 parts of it, Grim and Naga both responding to whatever quality the castle was emanating, a recognition, an ancient thing acknowledging another ancient thing. Yes, Naga said, very quietly. It knows. The castle, seen up close, was overwhelming to most of the first years in the way first encounters with enormous and genuinely old things are overwhelming. Harry heard someone, Lavender Brown, he'd find out, actually gasp. Neville was looking up at it with wide eyes. Hermione was looking at it with the particular intensity of someone cross-referencing the reality against the research. Draco Malfoy was also looking at it, Harry noticed, and the performance was entirely gone from his face in the way that very large genuine things strip performance from even the most practiced faces, and what was there instead was just a boy looking at something bigger than his family's expectations of it, bigger than his certainty, bigger than the version of the world he'd been handed. Harry looked at the castle and the castle was not beautiful exactly, or not only beautiful, but alive, alive the way the garden at Privet Drive had come alive the first time Harry had reached and listened, alive the way the realm of the dead was alive in its own enormous unhurried way. He felt it notice him back. Not dramatically. Not with a crack of thunder or a flash of light or any of the things that stories about significant moments usually contain. Just, a quality to the air around the boats, a slight shift in the reflections on the water, as though something that had been half asleep for a very long time had turned, without urgency, toward a new point of interest. Hello, Harry thought, at the castle, in the place below words where the Bond lived. The castle said nothing back. But the lights in its windows, for just a moment, burned a degree brighter. The great hall sorting was done by Hat, which was a sentient object, which Harry found excellent, a 1,000-year-old consciousness in a pointed piece of leather, still doing its job with the philosophical commitment of something that has had a very long time to get good at it. When the hat was placed on Harry's head, there was a silence that was immediately different from all the other silences. "Well," said the hat, in the inside of his head, with a voice that was layered, every headmaster who'd ever reinforced it, every generation's wisdom pressed into the weave, "I have not felt this in, oh my. Oh. Hello," Harry thought back. "You are, the Bond. The Triad." "I haven't felt, since before," a pause in which the hat appeared to be genuinely reorganizing its approach. "You realize this makes the sorting substantially more complicated. Does it?" Harry asked. "Gryffindor would have you for courage. Ravenclaw for knowledge. Slytherin for the power and the ambition, though your ambition isn't what they'd expect. And Hufflepuff," the hat paused, "Hufflepuff recognizes loyalty in a form it hasn't seen in centuries, the kind that the old texts call absolute." "I don't mind where you put me," Harry told it honestly. "That," the hat said, with something that was deeply, deeply amused, "is the most Hufflepuff thing anyone has ever said to me, and also the most Slytherin approach to appearing unattached that I have encountered, and also the most Gryffindor disregard for social consequence, and you are making my job extremely difficult, young man." Harry waited. The great hall waited. It had been longer than any other sorting, longer by a margin that was becoming noticeable, and the whispers were starting. Harry could feel them without hearing them, the particular vibrational quality of a room full of people making meaning out of a pause. "I'm putting you in Gryffindor," the hat said finally. "Not because you're the most Gryffindor, you're not, you're quite evenly distributed and that in itself is remarkable, but because of the 3 realms you carry, the one that is going to matter most in the next 7 years is the one that requires you to be brave in front of people who are watching. The other 2 will manage. But the living realm needs your face, Mr. Potter. It needs to see you uncovered." "That's surprisingly good reasoning," Harry admitted. "I've had 1,000 years to get better at it," the hat said, with satisfaction, and then, aloud, to the entire great hall, "Gryffindor." The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry took the hat off and handed it back to Professor McGonagall, who was looking at him with the careful attention of someone who had been watching a sorting for 30 years and has just seen something new. He walked to the Gryffindor table and sat down, and the applause was warm and overwhelming, and across the hall he saw Draco Malfoy watching him with those grey calculating eyes from the Slytherin table, and gave a small nod, which Malfoy returned after exactly the right pause to suggest it was his own idea. Neville was sorted Gryffindor 5 names later, and sat next to Harry with the slightly dazed expression of someone who'd been told by multiple people that Gryffindor wasn't for them and has just been told otherwise by the oldest authority in the room. Hermione was sorted Gryffindor after that, and sat on Harry's other side, and immediately opened her notebook. "Efficient," Naga said, from beneath Harry's collar. "Very," Harry agreed quietly. The feast appeared on the tables with a magic that was entirely theatrical and entirely successful, and the hall filled up with the noise of hundreds of children being happy and loud and alive, and Harry ate and listened and felt the castle around him, not with his ears, not with the basic senses, but with the Bond, with the reaching out that had become as natural as breathing over 7 years of practice. The castle was old and very full and very real, and it was aware of him in every stone, and somewhere in its depths, below the dungeons, below the foundations, below everything, something else was aware of him too. Something that recognized Naga's resonance. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time in the dark at the bottom of the world and was, very slowly, beginning to wake up. Harry ate his roast chicken and pretended to listen to Percy Weasley explain the house point system and made a note to visit the lower levels of the castle before anyone else thought to suggest he should or shouldn't. He had arrived. The world had no idea what to do with him. That, Harry thought, was probably exactly right. Chapter 4, What the Castle Remembers. The thing about Hogwarts that none of the guidebooks mentioned, and Harry had read several, including one written in 1743 that described the castle with the breathless enthusiasm of someone who just discovered it was sentient and hadn't quite recovered, was that it responded. Not to everyone. Not consistently. But in the way that very old things respond to very specific stimuli, the way a sleeping animal will turn toward a familiar hand, the castle had been noticing Harry since the moment his boat touched the shore, and by the second morning of term it had started doing things. Small things, at first. A torch in an empty corridor lighting itself 3 seconds before Harry turned the corner, saving him walking in the dark. A door that was supposed to require a password swinging open when he was running late for breakfast. A shortcut that Harry was fairly certain hadn't been there on the Tuesday revealing itself on the Wednesday between defense against the dark arts and transfiguration, saving him 4 minutes and 1 flight of stairs. The castle likes you, Naga observed, on the third day, as a particularly convenient staircase rotated of its own accord to land them directly at the entrance to the library. I think it's more that we understand each other, Harry said. It's old. It thinks in long patterns. I've spent 7 years learning how to listen to things that don't use words. Semantics, Naga said. Important semantics, Harry said. Hermione was waiting at their usual table, which had become their usual table with the speed that things become established between people who have found their frequency. 3 days at Hogwarts and she'd already claimed the second table from the left in the far corner, good sightlines, near the restricted section, adequate natural light, with the territorial certainty of someone who has done her homework on optimal study environments. She looked up when Harry sat down and immediately said, without preamble, I've been thinking about what Professor Binns said yesterday. Which part? Harry asked, opening his history of magic text. All of it, Hermione said. But specifically the section on the Chamber of Secrets, which he dismissed as likely mythology, except, she pushed a book across the table. This cross-references 3 separate accounts from the 1500s that describe the chamber in very specific architectural terms. Specific enough that they're clearly describing a real place. Binns either hasn't read this or chose not to include it, and I don't know which is worse. Harry looked at the open book. Then looked at Hermione. You've been in the library since 6 in the morning. Since 5:30, she corrected, without embarrassment. I like her, Naga said. Harry opened the cross-referenced book and read the passage. The Chamber of Secrets. A hidden chamber beneath the school, supposedly built by Salazar Slytherin, supposedly housing a monster. He read the architectural descriptions and let the Bond's awareness of the castle run lightly over what he was reading, cross-referencing text against the deep old certainty in the stone around him. The castle confirmed it. Not loudly. More like the quality of light changing in a room when you open a curtain, a shift in what was visible. Yes, the castle said, in its way. Below. Deep. Old. Sealed. Something was absolutely there. I know, Naga said, when Harry held the awareness quietly. I have known since we arrived. I did not want to tell you immediately. Why? Harry asked. Because, Naga said, what lives in that chamber is one of my kind. And approaching that truth required your roots here to deepen slightly before I handed it to you. You needed to feel the castle first. Harry set the book down and looked at the ceiling of the library for a moment, thinking. Harry? Hermione said. The chamber is real, Harry said. Binns is wrong. But I'd leave that research for now. The question of when and whether it's relevant will answer itself. Hermione looked at him with those sharp brown eyes doing their quick calibration. You know something. I know several things, Harry said. Which ones do you mean? The ones you're not saying, she said. Harry looked at her. She was 11 years old and she had already, in 3 days, mapped the difference between things he knew and things he was willing to say, and had identified the gap, and was calling it by name. He made a decision. "The chamber is real and I'll handle it when it needs handling," he said. "That's not me being secretive. That's me telling you the actual situation accurately." She considered this. "Okay," she said, in a tone that meant both "I accept this and I am absolutely not dropping this forever." Neville arrived, slightly out of breath, his bag over one shoulder and his herbology textbook in the wrong direction. He sat down, righted the textbook, and looked between Harry and Hermione with the attentive calm he'd been developing, a quality of patient observation that Harry recognized as a kind of intelligence that didn't announce itself. "What are we deciding?" Neville asked. "Nothing yet," Harry said. "But soon." "Right," Neville said, and opened his textbook, which was exactly the response Harry had come to expect from him. No push, no drama, just a steady "I'm here when it matters" that was, Harry had decided, one of the most valuable qualities a person could have. Potions was in the dungeons with Professor Snape, and Snape was a particular kind of problem. Harry had read about him. Had formed an assessment before walking into the dungeon classroom and seeing him in person, and the assessment had needed adjusting because reading about someone and being in the same room with someone were different experiences, especially when the someone in question was carrying 7 different kinds of pain in the set of their shoulders and had decided at some point that the most effective response to pain was to become the sharpest thing in the room. Harry understood that logic. He'd arrived at the edge of similar logic himself, at age 7, and Grimm had quietly steered him away from it, which he was now very grateful for. Snape called roll with the particular intentionality of someone who has scripted the first day and is following the script with precision, and when he reached Harry's name he paused with the specific pause of someone who has been anticipating a moment for 10 years and is adjusting their performance to the actual audience. "Ah," Snape said. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." The class, arrayed around their cauldrons, made the particular collective stillness of students waiting to see how this landed. Harry looked at Snape. Not with hostility. Not with the anxious deference that Snape was used to extracting from first years in the first 60 seconds of term. Just, directly. The look of someone who sees what's happening and is deciding how to respond to the thing that's actually there rather than the thing they were primed to expect. "Professor Snape," Harry said, evenly. A beat. Snape had expected something. Harry could see the micro-adjustment in his expression, the fractional recalibration. He pushed on with the script. "Tell me, Mr. Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" "Draught of living death," Harry said. Asphodel is a type of lily. The name comes from the plant associated with mourning and the afterlife in Greek tradition. Wormwood was used in funeral rites across 6 separate ancient cultures. Combined, the draught doesn't just induce sleep, it replicates the theta wave state of consciousness nearest to death without actual cessation. It's one of the most sophisticated potions ever developed because it requires understanding both the chemistry and the symbolic resonance of the ingredients. Silence in the dungeon. Snape was very still. Something had moved behind his eyes, the script had run off its tracks and he was doing rapid calculations behind a face designed to show nothing. "Where the bezoar is found," Snape said, quieter now. "Not a performance. A question. Stomach of a goat. It's an antidote for most poisons because it works on the body's natural resistance rather than against the poison itself, it amplifies what's already there rather than introducing something foreign. The difference between monkshood and wolfsbane. There is no difference. Same plant, 2 names. The ambiguity in the naming is actually significant. Monkshood refers to the shape of the flower, wolfsbane refers to its use. One name describes what it is, the other describes what it does. Most ingredients have that duality, if you read the etymology. Snape looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that the class had stopped pretending not to watch. 5 points to Gryffindor, Snape said, with the particular tone of someone awarding points against their own preference because intellectual honesty is a thing they cannot actually abandon, however much they want to. And 5 more if your practical work is equal to your theoretical knowledge, which it frequently is not. That seems fair, Harry said. Snape's eyes narrowed slightly. He moved on to the next student, and the class breathed again, and across the cauldron Hermione caught Harry's eye with an expression of wide, slightly stunned admiration. Neville, beside him, let out a very small breath he'd clearly been holding since roll call. The practical work was equal to Harry's theoretical knowledge. Which meant the 5 points arrived and Snape spent the rest of the lesson finding other things to criticize, and Harry let him, because there was no battle being won by arguing with a man who was working out his grief in the only arena he felt safe deploying it. He understood grief. He just didn't personalize it. Flying lessons were with Madame Hooch on a grey Thursday, and the brooms lined up on the grass responded to Harry's up with a speed that startled Madame Hooch and made Draco Malfoy, standing 2 positions down, look sideways at him. Harry held the broom in one hand. It was humming, the way his wand had hummed, that same recognition, the wood alive under his palm. He could feel the enchantment on it through the bond, the same reaching out that let him hear the sparrows in the garden, and the broomstick was not conscious the way the castle was conscious or the way animals were conscious, but it had a purpose and Harry understood purposes. When Hooch blew her whistle, Harry kicked off, and the ground dropped away, and the air took him, and above him was the sky and below him was the green of the grounds and the black of the lake and the grey of the castle walls, and for the first time in his memory Harry felt something that was uncomplicated. Just, free. Just air and height and speed, unobstructed. No managing anyone's expectations. No holding things carefully. Just him and the wind and the enormous simple fact of being off the ground. He stayed up longer than the lesson technically required. Hooch called him down with a mixture of disapproval and the barely concealed enthusiasm of someone who has just seen a natural flyer and is fighting the instinct to immediately contact the Quidditch captain. Draco caught him on the way back to the castle, separated from his bookends for once, which made him more honest. "You've flown before," he said. "No," Harry said. Draco looked at him with those grey eyes that had been doing considerably more thinking than they'd been trained to display. "You looked like you'd been flying your whole life." "I've been listening for a long time," Harry said. "It's similar." Draco was quiet for a moment. "My father says you're going to be trouble for people who want things to stay the way they are." "What do you think?" Harry asked. A pause. "I think my father is right," Draco said. "I'm still deciding whether that's a problem." Harry looked at him. "You have time to decide." "Do I?" Draco said, and it wasn't quite a question. "You're 11, Harry said. Everyone's trying to make you think the decisions are already made. They're not." Something passed across Draco Malfoy's face that was too complicated for one word and too honest to be performed. He nodded, once, and walked away, and Harry watched him go and thought that the boy who had arrived at the train compartment like a calling card was spending considerable energy discovering that the cards he'd been handed weren't all of what was available. Dumbledore's move came on the 4th week of term. Harry had been expecting it. He'd been watching for it, the way you watch for weather, not with anxiety, just with the attention of someone who knows it's coming and wants to see what shape it arrives in. It arrived as an invitation to tea. A note delivered by a school owl, in handwriting that was looping and warm and deliberate in its warmth. "Dear Harry, I wonder if you might join me for tea Thursday afternoon. No agenda beyond getting to know one another a little better. 4th floor, left of the gargoyle. A.D." Harry read it twice. He wrote back, "Thursday works. Thank you." The office was everything Harry had expected, circular, warm, full of silver instruments that clicked and spun, portraits of former headmasters doing a fairly poor job of pretending to sleep, the phoenix fox on his perch burning with the particular warmth of a creature that has made peace with its own cycle. And Dumbledore, standing as Harry came in, with those half-moon glasses and those blue eyes that were simultaneously warm and measuring and very, very old. "Harry," he said, as though they were resuming a conversation rather than beginning one. "Sit, please. Tea." "Yes, thank you," Harry said, and sat, and took the tea, and looked at Dumbledore across the desk. Dumbledore looked back. Neither of them spoke for a moment, and in that moment Harry felt the man doing what he imagined was a very sophisticated magical assessment, reading the room, reading Harry, reading the resonances, doing it with the practiced subtlety of someone who'd been performing magical analysis for a century and doing it well. Harry let him look. He had nothing to hide. That was, he'd decided, the most disorienting position he could occupy, not hidden, not guarded, just present and entire. "You are," Dumbledore said, setting down his tea, "not what I expected." "People keep saying that," Harry said pleasantly. "I imagine they do." Those blue eyes moved to Harry's forehead briefly, the same professional assessment Hermione had done on the street, except Dumbledore's was reading considerably more than a scar. "Something changed when you were very young. My instruments detected it the night it occurred, but I confess I have been uncertain how to interpret the data." "What did your instruments tell you?" Harry asked. "That 3 resonances formed around you simultaneously. Ancient ones. That the connection in your scar became significantly less stable." He paused. "And that you became, in terms of what my instruments were calibrated to measure, something considerably beyond their calibration." "And what do you think that means?" Harry asked. Dumbledore smiled. It was a genuine smile and a careful one simultaneously, the smile of someone who genuinely likes the person they're talking to and is also actively strategizing. "I think it means you have some remarkable allies. I think it means the situation regarding your connection to Voldemort is more complex than I had understood. And I think," he said, with a quietness that had genuine weight, "that I owe you a conversation I should have had with you long before you arrived here." Harry waited. "There is a prophecy," Dumbledore said. And told him. Not the exact words, those would come later, much later, and in different circumstances, but the shape of it. "Neither can live while the other survives. The boy born as the 7th month dies. Marked as his equal." Harry listened to the whole thing with the steady attention he developed over years of listening to things that required it, and when Dumbledore finished, he picked up his tea and drank some and set it down. "I know about the scar fragment," Harry said. Dumbledore went very still. "You know that there's a piece of Voldemort's soul in my scar?" "Yes. I've known for several years." "Harry," Dumbledore's voice had changed. Something in it that was more complex than the performance of warmth, something that was actually, genuinely alarmed, and also something that was the specific alarm of a man whose plan has just been revealed to its subject before the subject was supposed to know about it. "You were going to tell me eventually," Harry said. "I'm not angry about the timeline. I understand why you'd want me not to know too early. Knowledge of your own mortality at age 4 is a lot. I assume you were building toward a moment when you tell me and I'd understand it meant I had to die." He said it cleanly, without drama. "I'm not going to die. Harry, the fragment can be removed," Harry said. "Without my death. The method isn't available to standard wizarding magic, which is why you couldn't see it. But it's available to me." He looked at Dumbledore directly. "I know you've been planning for a very long time, and I know you care, genuinely, about what happens. I also know that your plan has been built on incomplete information, and I need you to know that, not as a criticism, but as a fact we both need to work from." Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. The silver instruments clicked and spun. Fawkes made a soft sound. "Who are they?" Dumbledore said, finally. "The 3 resonances." "Mine," Harry said. "Simple. Final." "Harry, they're mine," Harry said, not harshly, but with the absolute bedrock certainty of someone establishing a perimeter. "They're not threats. They're not something you need to assess for safety. They are my family, and the 3 realms they represent are my responsibility. I'll tell you more as it becomes relevant. What I need from you is trust that I understand my own situation." Dumbledore looked at him for a long time with those blue eyes that had watched everything for a very long time. Harry looked back. Not defiantly. Not coldly. With the specific quality that Grim had demonstrated in the cupboard under the stairs on the first night, the patience of something that doesn't need to assert itself because it is simply, absolutely, there. You are 11 years old, Dumbledore said, softly, and there was in it something that wasn't quite grief but lived in the same neighborhood. Yes, Harry said. I'm 11 years old and Lord of 3 realms, and I have known about the fragment in my scar since I was 8, and I have been educated in magic older than this school by teachers older than this country, and I'm not frightened of what's coming. He picked up his tea again. I think that's actually very good news for you. Fawkes sang, suddenly, one clear rising note. Dumbledore looked at his phoenix and then back at Harry, and something in his face moved, not surrender, not quite, but the first adjustment of someone very sure of their map discovering that the territory is different. I'd like to keep talking, Dumbledore said. Regularly. If you'd allow it. Of course, Harry said. I think you're probably the most interesting person in the building. Dumbledore blinked. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a real one, surprised out of him, warm and genuine. I have never been described as interesting quite in that tone. You mean like I'm being careful about it? Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said. Exactly like that. It was mid-November when Quirrell began to be a problem. Harry had been watching the defense against the dark arts professor since the first week. Grim had flagged it, a quality in the man's thread, a wrongness that wasn't sickness and wasn't quite health, the particular signature of something occupying a space it hadn't been invited into. The stutter was performance. The timidity was performance. What lived underneath both was something that stank, in the way the Bond read things, of desperation and old servitude. And underneath that, faint, very faint, but completely unmistakable to Harry after years of learning what it felt like in his own scar, the same resonance as the fragment. Same origin. Same fundamental signature. He's a host, Grim confirmed, after Harry had spent a week sitting in Quirrell's class and letting the Bond read the room. A willing one, initially, though I think the willingness has long since become irrelevant. The larger piece is using him. Voldemort is in this school, Harry said. The part that is currently functional, yes. The fragment in your scar is dormant. The probe I interrupted in the summer was its attempt to reach the larger piece. Now they are in proximity and the fragment is stirring. What does he want? There is something in this school he needs, Grim said. Something related to his restoration. I believe you know what it is. Harry thought about Gringotts. About the vault that had been emptied. He'd heard the whispers, the talk between older students about a break-in over the summer, a vault supposedly cleared by Dumbledore on the same day. He thought about what kind of object Voldemort, a man so afraid of death that he'd shattered his own soul into pieces to avoid it, would need from Gringotts. The Philosopher's Stone, Harry said. Yes. And it's here. Dumbledore moved it here. A protection scheme. Traps and enchantments. He intends for the stone to be safe. He intends for the stone to be retrievable only by someone who wants to find it but not use it, Harry said, which was a deduction Grim confirmed with silence. Which is elegant, actually. It just doesn't account for Quirrell being already inside the castle. Harry thought about it for 3 days. He attended classes. He ate meals. He helped Hermione with a charms essay and listened to Neville explain the properties of Devil's Snare with a quiet growing enthusiasm that came out in the way he talked about roots, the way some people talk about music. He played chess against Ron Weasley, who was the best chess player Harry had ever seen and who had the frustrated energy of someone who has been told since childhood that chess doesn't count as talent and can't quite shake that assessment even while systematically beating everyone in a year. He had not told anyone about Quirrell. Not yet. You're deciding, Naga said, on the 4th night. I'm deciding, Harry confirmed. What are the options? Tell Dumbledore. Go directly to the stone. Or wait. What does waiting gain? Information. Right now I know Quirrell is here and wants the stone and can't get it yet because the protections are in the way. Quirrell moving means Voldemort is ready to move. If I wait for him to move, I know exactly when and where. And the risk of waiting? Someone else stumbles into it first, Harry said. Or Quirrell finds a faster path than I'm expecting. So I tell Dumbledore about Quirrell, Harry said. Not everything. Not the stone directly, he'll know I know more than I should if I come at him with that complete a picture. But enough that he tightens the protections and buys time. And the stone itself? I'll be ready when Quirrell makes his move, Harry said. Which I'll know before he does, because I'll feel the fragments stir. The next morning Harry stopped by Dumbledore's office without an invitation, which was new. The gargoyle stepped aside before he even said the password, which was the castle being helpful again, and he went up the moving staircase and knocked. Come in, Dumbledore said, and looked up from his desk with the expression of someone who has been informed, presumably by the gargoyle moving of its own accord, that their morning just got more interesting. Harry sat down without being invited, which was also new. Dumbledore registered it with the slight adjustment of someone noting a change in weather. Professor Quirrell, Harry said. I'd look at him. A pause. What specifically should I be looking at? Whether he came back from his sabbatical with everything he left with, Harry said. Another pause. Longer. Why do you say that? Because something is wrong with him and it isn't illness, Harry said, which was as far as he was willing to go, specific enough to be useful, not so complete as to reveal the bond's capabilities. I'd rather you deal with it before it becomes relevant. Dumbledore was looking at him with those blue eyes that were doing very rapid, very sophisticated work behind their warmth. Harry. If there is something you know, I know something is wrong with Quirrell, Harry said. What you do with that is your call. I'm not the headmaster. He went to breakfast. The first snow came in December, and with it the cold that settled into the castle stones and made the corridors sharp and bright, and Harry walked them with Grim's invisible weight at his shoulder and Naga warm at his neck and the bond running through everything like a river under ice, present, moving, alive. The fragment in his scar was quieter since Harry's proximity to Quirrell had become routine. It was dormant. But Grim tracked it the way a tide tracks the moon, with perfect accuracy and zero urgency. On the last Friday before the winter holidays, Quirrell arrived at the dinner table looking like a man who had made a decision he wasn't comfortable with and had made it anyway. The quality of desperation in him had tightened. His thread, visible to Harry's bond sight, was taut in a way that suggested someone pulling hard at something that was pulling harder back. Harry ate his soup and felt the fragment stir. Soon, Grim said. Not soon enough to ruin Christmas, Harry thought. No, Grim agreed. Not until after Christmas. Harry looked down the table at Hermione, who was arguing with Seamus about something historical and winning comprehensively, and at Neville, who was feeding something to Trevor under the table with the guilty expression of someone who knows bringing a toad to dinner is technically against the rules, and felt the particular warmth of the bond amplify slightly, the way it did when Harry was noticing something that Grim and Naga wanted him to pay attention to. He'd been paying attention. He'd been paying attention since the moment the bond formed and hadn't stopped. These people, this table, this castle, these specific people who had in 11 weeks become something he hadn't expected, which was the word he'd put his hand around and held carefully because it still felt new and real and worth protecting, were why the stone mattered. Not in the abstract. Not because of prophecy or strategy or the long game of whatever Dumbledore was playing. Because someone wanted to walk into the home of the living and take something that belonged to death's domain, immortality, stolen, extracted, weaponized, and Harry was lord of 3 realms and that was, simply, his business. Not Dumbledore's. Not the Ministry's. His. The snow fell on the castle grounds and the lake froze at its edges and the castle dreamed its long slow dreams around them all, and Harry looked up at the enchanted ceiling of the great hall with its grey winter sky and felt, for the first time in his life, entirely in the right place. He was ready. Chapter 5, The Heir Speaks. The chamber opened on a Wednesday. Harry knew it before anyone else did, not because he'd been watching for it specifically, though he had been, but because the castle told him. Not in words. In the particular quality of the silence that moved through the stones at 2 in the morning on the second week of February, a held-breath silence that radiated upward from somewhere below the dungeons like heat from deep ground. He was awake before the silence fully arrived. Now, Naga said, in his mind. I feel it, Grimm confirmed. Harry was dressed and out of the dormitory in under a minute. He'd slept in his clothes twice this week already, which Hermione had noticed and not commented on, which meant she was saving the comment for when she had more context, which was exactly the kind of patience that made her invaluable. The corridor was dark and cold. Harry moved through it without a torch and without hesitation. The castle's awareness of him meant the shadows were navigable, lit just enough by a torch here and a window there, the castle adjusting as he moved like a conversation between two people who have learned each other's rhythms. Down 2 flights. Through the corridor that bypassed the trophy room. Past the second-floor girls' bathroom that smelled like ghosts, which was because it was haunted by one, a weeping presence Harry had sensed since the first week but hadn't approached yet. He stopped outside it now. The entrance is there, Naga said. Through the sink. There is a serpent engraved on the tap. Harry pushed the door open. The bathroom was dim and damp and moaning Myrtle was present in the way that ghosts are present, more emotional weather than person, a grief that had been spinning in one place for 50 years and had hollowed itself into something self-sustaining. She noticed Harry immediately, because ghosts notice the living with the hungry attention of things that miss it, and then she noticed what Harry carried with him, the realm's edge, the dead's awareness at his shoulder, and she went very still. You can feel the other side, she said, instead of hello. Her voice was less wailing than usual. More careful. Yes, Harry said. Can you? She stopped. Started again. There are people I'd like a message delivered to. I can't travel there yet, Harry said honestly. When I can, I'll come back. He meant it, and she heard that he meant it, and something in her expression, what expression a ghost could hold, shifted from its default of agitated misery into something quieter. The sink, she said, and pointed. The tap with the serpent. I saw her open it. The one who set it all in motion the first time, 50 years ago. Thank you, Harry said. He crouched in front of the sink. The tap was there, a small serpent cast in the metal, barely visible unless you were looking. Harry put one finger against it, and in Parseltongue, in the old voice that Naga had taught him and that felt like it lived in his chest rather than his throat, he said simply, open. The sink dropped away. The floor opened. A pipe large enough to slide down, dark and long, breathed cold air up at him. Harry looked at it. Then looked at Naga. How deep? He asked. Very, Naga said. Harry stepped in and dropped. The slide was long and dark and genuinely unpleasant for approximately 4 seconds, and then the realm's edge and the bond adjusted to the dark and the cold and Harry arrived at the bottom in a controlled landing on soft earth and stood up and looked at what was in front of him. A corridor. Ancient stone, older than the floors above, older than the Founders, built into the bedrock of the promontory the castle sat on. The walls were carved with serpents, not decoratively, not artistically, but with the intent of inscription, the way you carve something to make it permanent and understood. Harry read them as he walked. Not the English translations, which he could do, but the Parseltongue originals, which Naga had spent 2 years teaching him to read because written serpent speech was a different animal from spoken, more compressed, more layered. Salazar Slytherin's work, Naga said. He was not a pure speaker, he had perhaps a third of the true tongue. But he was diligent. The inscriptions are instructions. Warnings. And one claim of ownership that is, a fractional pause, incorrect. He claimed the basilisk was his, Harry said, reading. He believed it was. He was wrong. The basilisk who lived here was old before Slytherin was born. It agreed to a stewardship, not a servitude. He confused those things, as your kind often does. Harry walked. The corridor was long and the further in he went the older the magic got, the school's enchantments thinned and something underneath them thickened, something that was less structured, more fundamental, the kind of magic that predated the concept of spell work, that existed the way gravity exists, because the world required it. The door at the end was stone, with carved serpents that moved when Harry approached, because they were not decorative either, they were guards, and they recognized what was coming with the same instinct that had moved the crowd on Diagon Alley. "Lord," they said, in the carved serpent language that was more vibration than sound. "Open," Harry told them. The Chamber of Secrets was enormous. That was the first thing. Not dark, not claustrophobic, not the dungeon-like space Harry had half expected, but a cathedral space, vast and columned, the ceiling so far above that it disappeared into shadow. The columns were carved serpents, floor to ceiling, their scales detailed enough that they looked alive in the green-lit darkness, and the green light came from the water that ran in channels along the walls and pooled in the center of the floor, water that had been there long enough to have its own ecosystem, small things living in it that Harry's bond identified as ancient and unbothered and entirely fine. At the far end, behind a face carved in stone that was meant to be Slytherin and was about 40% accurate, something breathed. Something enormous. Harry walked toward it. The breathing was slow. A rhythm like geological time, each inhalation and exhalation separated by minutes. The sound of it in the chamber was like weather, like a system, like a thing that was so large that its biology had become climate. "She has been here for 900 years, Naga said, and his voice in the bond had something Harry had never heard from him before, a quality that was, unmistakably, reverence. Sleeping. Waking. Sleeping again. Slytherin woke her first. Then the boy 50 years ago. Each time, she woke confused and in pain, and each time, she was used and put back. She does not trust waking. She." Harry said. "Did you think basilisks had no gender?" Naga said, with the dry reproof of someone noting an assumption. "She is very old, Harry. Older than I am, and I am not young. She is the last of the true line." Harry stopped walking. He was 50 feet from the face of Slytherin, in the pooled green water up to his ankles, cold and still and real, and somewhere behind that carved face a creature 900 years old was breathing the way mountains breathe, in time with something that had nothing to do with human urgency. He didn't speak in English. He didn't speak in the truncated Parseltongue that Slytherin's inscriptions used. He spoke in the deep language that Naga had spent 2 years in advanced lessons teaching him, true serpent tongue, old enough to predate human language, complex enough to carry meaning in harmonics, in the intervals between sounds as much as in the sounds themselves. "Elder sister," he said. "I am not the boy who hurt you before. I am not the heir who summoned you. I am not the man who made you a weapon. I ask nothing of you. I came to speak." The breathing changed. It was subtle. A different quality of attention in it, the way a sleeper shifts when something real enters a dream. Then, slowly enough that Harry had time to appreciate that slow was a choice, not an inability, something moved behind the carved stone face. The basilisk emerged. She was the size of a ship. That was the truest comparison Harry had, not long like a river or thick like a tree, but scaled the way a ship is scaled, the way something built for deep water is scaled, built for a size of world that the human one sat inside of without knowing. Her scales were not the black-green of Naga's, hers were deep gold at their centers, fading through amber to near black at the edges, and they caught the green light of the chamber water and threw it back in every direction, so that when she moved the entire chamber moved with her in light. Her eyes were closed. Harry understood immediately, she was keeping them closed for him, a deliberate, enormous act of care from a creature that had been used as a weapon, choosing to protect him before he could ask. He felt the bond shift. Not in the way it shifted for Grimm or Naga, not with the complete certainty of an established connection, but in the way it shifted when Harry extended the realm of beasts outward, when he listened to something and it listened back, and what came from this creature was, old. So old. And tired. And underneath the tired, the particular quality of something that had been told what it was by people who didn't know, had been defined and weaponized and put back in the dark, and had eventually believed, in the way that very old and very isolated things believe things, that this was all it was. "You are not a weapon," Harry said, in the true tongue. Her head moved toward him. Her eyes stayed closed. "The last boy who came called me that," she said, and her voice was the chamber itself, the water and the stone and the ancient air. "He said I was his. He said my purpose was." "He was wrong," Harry said. "About you and about himself." A long silence filled only with the sound of water in the channels. "You speak the true tongue," she said. "My teacher is Naga," Harry said. "Who is?" "I know who Naga is," she said, and in the way she said it was 900 years of knowing, of having been a child when Naga was already ancient, of having learned from the same deep tradition. "Naga lives?" "Naga is my family," Harry said. Another silence. Longer. Harry stood in the green water and waited with the patience that 7 years of Grimm had built in him, the patience of something that understands that time is not the enemy, that urgency is a human concept, and that some things only move at their own speed. "What are you?" she asked, finally. Harry showed her, rather than told her. He let the bond expand, let the three-realm resonance unfurl in the chamber the way it unfurled when something required his whole self, and the green light in the water deepened, and the carved serpents on the columns moved, and Grimm's presence, invisible to eyes but entirely present to the bond, filled the chamber with the particular weight of the realm of the dead, and the elder basilisk breathed it in and was very, very still. "Lord," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "And what that means is, your stewardship here ends when you want it to end. You are not a guardian and not a weapon and not anyone's heritage. If you want to leave, I will open a path. If you want to stay, no one will reach you through that corridor again without my permission. The choice is yours. I came to give it to you." The silence that followed was the longest yet. Harry was aware, distantly, that it was now somewhere near 4 in the morning and he had Transfiguration at 9 and McGonagall had exactly 0 tolerance for students who looked like they'd been wandering tunnels all night, and he was also aware that none of that mattered at all against this moment, which was the kind that only came once and required everything. "I will stay," the elder basilisk said, finally. "This ground is mine. I know its stones. I do not want the outside world." A pause. "But I want," she stopped. "Tell me," Harry said. "I want to be asked," she said. "Not commanded. Not summoned. Not sent. If you need me, Lord, ask. And I will consider." "That is all I would ever do," Harry said. Her head came down, then, the enormous golden amber head, slow and deliberate, and rested for one moment against Harry's hand where it was flat on the water's surface, and the contact was the same electric total reality as the bond itself, the realm of beasts recognizing its own, and then she pulled back and turned and moved into the shadows at the far end of the chamber, and was still. Harry stood in the green water for a moment with his hand open and the echo of contact still running through the bond. "Well done," Naga said quietly. Harry looked at the chamber, at the carved columns and the green-lit water and the 900-year-old ceiling, and felt the castle acknowledge it through the stones, a shift in its awareness, something resolved, something that had been wrong for 900 years moving back toward right. "Right," he said to himself, and turned, and walked back up the corridor. He was halfway back to the pipe when he heard the other footsteps. He stopped. Listened. 2 sets of feet, one heavier, one lighter, moving through the chamber entrance with the particular combination of determination and barely controlled fear that Harry had come to recognize, in the past months, as Hermione Granger dragging Neville Longbottom somewhere neither of them was supposed to be. He turned back. They appeared at the chamber entrance 30 seconds later, Hermione with her wand lit and an expression of concentrated focus, Neville with his wand also up and an expression that was beyond fear into a place that was so far past fear it had become something harder, and they both stopped when they saw Harry standing in the green water looking at them. "Harry," Hermione said. Not accusatory. Assessing. Her eyes moved over the chamber, the columns, the water, the carved face of Slytherin, the darkness at the far end. Her jaw set. You knew? Yes, Harry said. How long? Since September, Harry said. Hermione breathed in through her nose. And you didn't tell you? Harry looked at her. What would you have done in September? A pause. Researched, she said. And then? Told someone, she admitted, and the admission was honest and slightly uncomfortable, the acknowledgement of someone recognizing that their default response would have escalated a situation that required a different kind of handling. Neville had lowered his wand but hadn't put it away, which was exactly the right call, and Harry filed it as further evidence that Neville was more himself every week. He was looking at the chamber with wide eyes that were tracking everything, the size of it, the age of it, the green water, the breathing they could probably both still hear from the far end. Is she still here? Neville said. Harry looked at him. How did you know it was a she? The breathing, Neville said. I don't know. It just sounded. He stopped. I study plants, and some plants that people call dangerous they're not dangerous. They're just themselves and people are afraid of them. I thought the breathing sounded like that. Like something that's itself. Harry looked at Neville Longbottom for a moment with the particular focus of someone confirming something they'd been quietly observing for months. She's here, he said. She's fine. The chamber is handled. Handled how? Hermione said. She agreed to her own terms, Harry said. She stays because she wants to. Nobody gets through that corridor without me. Hermione stared at him. Then at the darkness at the far end. Then back. You spoke to her. Yes. In Parseltongue. In true serpent tongue, Harry said. Which is different. More complex. You speak true, Hermione stopped. Restarted. Harry. How do you speak true serpent tongue? It's listed in Villanur as a language with no living speakers because the last practitioners were. I had a good teacher, Harry said, for the third time in his life. Hermione made a sound that was neither agreement nor frustration but existed in the space between them, the sound of someone filing things in a mental folder that was becoming very full. Then she looked at the chamber one more time, and something in her expression shifted from investigative to something more private, a genuine awe that she usually kept well contained escaping slightly at the edges. It's extraordinary, she said quietly. The architecture. The inscription work on the columns. Do you know what this chamber is worth to the study of pre-Hogwarts magical history? This is 900 years of, Hermione, Harry said. We're not telling anyone, she said, completing the sentence herself. Right. Not yet, Harry said. Maybe not for a long time. She nodded. Once. Filed it. They went back up through the pipe, Harry first, then Hermione, who performed a spell that made the ascent considerably easier than the descent, and then Neville, who arrived at the top with his toad somehow still in his pocket, which was the most Neville outcome possible and which made Harry smile in the dark bathroom while Myrtle watched from her U-bend with something that might, on a ghost, have been described as peaceful. They split at the second-floor corridor with the understanding that the conversation was not over and the silence around it was not suppression but patience, and Harry went back to Gryffindor Tower and lay on his bed and looked at the ceiling. She will be all right, Naga said. I know, Harry said. She was all right the moment we got there. She just needed someone to see that. There is a lesson in that which applies to more than basilisks, Grimm said. I know, Harry said again. He slept 3 hours. It was enough. 2 weeks later, Quirrell moved. Harry felt the fragment in his scar flare on a Saturday evening, sharp and sudden, the way a sleeping animal comes awake all at once. He was in the library with Hermione and Neville working on a charms essay, and the sensation was distinct enough that his hand went to his forehead before he could stop it. Both of them saw it. Go, Hermione said immediately. You're not, Harry. Her voice was absolute. Go. We'll be here. He went. The corridors were quiet. It was dinner, most of the school in the great hall, the building unusually empty. Harry moved fast, not running, not urgency panicked, but the focused speed of someone covering ground with a purpose. Grim ran with him through the bond and the castle adjusted around him, staircase ready before he reached it, door already cracked. The third-floor corridor. The door Filch's cat had been found near in September, the one that the whole school whispered about, the one that Dumbledore had announced in the most effective attention-attracting way possible was strictly forbidden and therefore, inevitably, the subject of constant speculation. The door was already open. Harry went through. The devil's snare trap was already triggered and dealt with, which meant Quirrell had moved through the protections ahead of him. The flying keys were scattered and still, the correct one in the lock. The troll was unconscious. The potions puzzle at the end, a logic problem involving flame, had one bottle empty. Harry drank the remaining correct potion without hesitation and passed through the black flame and into the last chamber. The mirror of Eriste stood against the far wall, tall and ornate and breathing with magic that was ancient and deeply strange, a mirror that showed not reflection but desire, and Harry knew what it was immediately because Dumbledore had mentioned it during one of their Thursday teas, had described it with the particular careful tone of someone referencing something they've moved for a reason. Quirrell stood before it with his hands out and the desperation that Harry had been watching build for months reaching its peak, and turned when Harry came through the black flame with the reflexive shock of someone who had done everything right and still found something waiting for them at the end. "Potter," he said, and the stutter was gone. Just a flat, exhausted voice. "Quirrell," Harry said. "How?" Quirrell's hands moved toward his wand. "You shouldn't be here." "No child should have, the protections weren't meant for me," Harry said. He looked at the mirror. "You can't get the stone." "The mirror," Quirrell's face twisted. "It shows what I want but I cannot reach it, because you want to use it," Harry said. "That's the trap. You want to use it and the mirror knows." He looked at Quirrell directly. "Move away from it." Quirrell laughed, a ragged, shredded sound. "You're 11 years old." "Yes," Harry said. "Move away from the mirror." "He wants to speak with you," Quirrell said, and his hand went to his turban, unwinding it with the particular terrible deliberateness of a man past the point of choice. "He has wanted to speak with you since, I know what he wants," Harry said. "And the answer is no." The turban fell. The face on the back of Quirrell's head was the most wrong thing Harry had seen in 11 years, not because of how it looked, though what it looked like was not something human faces were meant to look like, gaunt and red-eyed and compressed into the back of another man's skull, but because of what Harry felt through the bond when it turned toward him. The fragment in his scar recognized it. And Grim, in the bond, moved. "Not yet," Harry said to Grim. "Let him speak." "Harry Potter," the face said. Its voice was not Quirrell's voice, it was something that had been voice once and become something else, something stripped of everything that wasn't need and will. "I have been waiting for this moment since the night I failed to kill you. Do you know what you are?" "Better than you," Harry said. The red eyes moved over him with a cold, brilliant intelligence that Harry respected even while recognizing that the intelligence was organized entirely around its own survival and was therefore limited in the specific way that all single-minded things are limited. "You carry the three-realm resonance," Voldemort said. "I can feel it. Something bound itself to you. Something old." "Yes," Harry said. "Give me the stone," Voldemort said. "And I will tell you everything. About your parents. About the night of the prophecy. About what you truly are." "I know what I truly am," Harry said. "And I know what you are. You're a fragment. You're a sixth of a man who was afraid of dying and tore himself to pieces to avoid it and ended up becoming exactly what he feared, something less than alive." The red eyes narrowed. "You know about the Horcruxes." "I know about the piece of you that's been living in my scar," Harry said. "Yes." Something moved across Voldemort's face, surprise, and underneath it the particular alarm of someone who has built an entire architecture on a secret and discovered the secret has been known. Then you know you cannot destroy me without dying. Harry said. No. I don't need to die. That was an error in Dumbledore's understanding, not a fact. The realm of the dead doesn't work the way he thinks it works. No human has ever. I'm not operating on human precedent, Harry said, and there was no heat in it, no performance, just the flat clean certainty of something that has thought this through completely and arrived at a conclusion that doesn't require volume. Quirrell's hands shot out, reaching for Harry, and made contact with his wrist, and pulled back with a scream that filled the chamber and bounced off the stone walls, because where Quirrell's hands touched Harry's skin the contact produced something that the bond didn't have vocabulary for, but that the realm of the dead identified immediately. Harry felt it through Grim, the realm reaching up through him, through his skin, into whatever made contact, and Quirrell's hands where they touched him were grey and then white and then crumbling, because Quirrell was already barely alive, the fragment of Voldemort consuming him like a fire consuming wood, and the thing that had been consuming him met the realm of the dead in Harry's skin and the collision was final. Quirrell crumbled. It took seconds and Harry watched it with his feet flat on the stone and Grim blazing in the bond and Naga tight and still at his neck, and when it was over what was on the floor of the chamber was something that had been a person and was now the aftermath of a person, and Harry felt the fragment in his scar slam awake in response. The red-eyed face was not Quirrell anymore. Had no face at all. Was a shape in the air above the crumbling body, less than a face, barely a form, the particular shape of something reduced to its minimum, will in spite and terror, compressed into barely nothing. You, it said, in a voice that was now just sound with no structure. Harry looked at it. Go, he said, simply, and the realm of the dead moved with him, through him, at his command for the first time fully and completely, not a full summoning, not a path between worlds, but a direction, ascending, and the fragment of Voldemort in the air above Quirrell's remains felt it and recoiled and fled, through the walls, through the stone, out of the castle and away into whatever distance a non-corporeal piece of torn soul could cover. The fragment in his scar tried to follow. Hold, Grim said, and the scar blazed white and Harry put his hand against it and held the fragment in place against its screaming effort to go after its source, held it by the sheer force of the bond and the realm's authority until it went dormant again, exhausted, pushed back below conscious threshold. Harry stood in the chamber for a moment and breathed. The mirror of Eriste showed him nothing. Or rather, he looked at it once, involuntarily, and what it showed was not desire but recognition. Not what he wanted but what he had. The bond, luminous in the mirror's surface. Grim and Naga. Hermione and Neville. The castle, warm around him. 3 realms, his, settled. He looked away without lingering. He reached into the mirror, not physically, but with the bond's reach, the way he'd opened the entrance to the chamber, the way he'd touched the realm of the dead, and felt the stone, and took it. It dropped into his palm. Small, red, warm, and humming with magic that was old enough to remember when magic and life were the same word. He put it in his pocket and walked back through the black flame. Dumbledore was waiting on the other side. Not dramatically. Just standing in the corridor outside the 3rd-floor door with his hands clasped and his half-moon glasses catching the torchlight and his expression doing something that was complicated enough that Harry took a moment to read it. Grief. Relief. Something that was being adjusted in real time, a fundamental belief system encountering evidence and choosing, actively, consciously, to accommodate it rather than resist it. Not easy. Not instant. But happening. Quirrell, Harry said. I know, Dumbledore said quietly. I felt it through the castle. Harry held out the stone. Dumbledore looked at it in Harry's palm for a long moment. Then at Harry. The blue eyes were older than they'd been an hour ago, or maybe Harry was just seeing them more clearly. You should have told me, Dumbledore said, and it came out less like a reprimand and more like someone acknowledging their own culpability in not having created a space where telling was possible. You would have tried to handle it, Harry said. And Quirrell would have gotten to you before you got to him, because he was already inside. A pause. That is, probably accurate. The stone needs to not exist, Harry said. Whatever you were going to do with it, this is more permanent. Dumbledore looked at him. Nicholas Flamel has had a very long life, Harry said. And the stone existing in the world creates a target. Whoever wants it will keep coming. You know that. Another long pause. Dumbledore looked at the stone. Then he reached into his robes and produced nothing. He didn't take it from Harry, didn't reach for it. He just said, quietly, "May I?" Harry held it out. Dumbledore took it, and held it for a moment, and his eyes closed briefly, and Harry understood that whatever the old man was thinking in that moment was private and real and not performance, and he gave him the space for it. Then Dumbledore closed his fist and the stone dissolved, not dramatically, not with light or sound, just gone, unmade, released from the purpose it had been built for. The dissolution of something that had spent 600 years being the most wanted object in the world, simply let go. The corridor was very quiet. "I owe you an apology," Dumbledore said. "You owe me a better conversation," Harry said. "The apology is secondary." Something shifted in Dumbledore's face. Toward something more honest. More equal. The beginning of a different kind of conversation than they'd been having, one that acknowledged what was actually in the room. "Yes," he said. "I believe you're right." They walked back toward the inhabited parts of the castle together, the old headmaster and the 11-year-old lord of 3 realms, and the castle lit their way without being asked, torch by torch, stair by stair, warm and old and entirely certain of both of them. "Well," Naga said, "in the private place of the bond." "Well," Grim agreed. Harry said nothing. He was thinking about what Voldemort had said, the Horcruxes, the plural, the pieces of a shattered soul that were scattered and hiding and waiting, and he was thinking about the fragment in his scar and the promise Grim had made that it could be removed, and he was thinking about all the things that were still in front of him, the long road of it, the work. He wasn't afraid of the road. He was, in fact, exactly the right person for it, and for the first time in his life he didn't think that with any edge of doubt. He thought it the way he thought everything important, the way he'd said okay in the cupboard under the stairs 7 years ago. Simply. Completely. And meaning every word. Chapter 6, The Declaration. The Owl arrived on a Tuesday morning in late June, 3 weeks after the end of term exams, and it landed on the Gryffindor table with the self-important bearing of ministry correspondence, a large grey bird with an official seal on its leg that it presented for removal with the air of something that understood its own bureaucratic significance. Harry was eating toast. He removed the seal, unrolled the parchment, and read it while Hermione watched from across the table with the particular stillness of someone who has learned to read Harry's face for information before asking questions. The parchment was formal. Ministerial font, ministry letterhead, the kind of language that used 12 words where 3 would do. The summary, stripped of its architectural verbiage, was this: Harry James Potter was summoned to appear before a full session of the Wisengamot on July the 15th, at 10 in the morning, to address matters of significant public concern regarding unauthorized use of ancient magics, suspected violation of the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, and the unregistered presence of dangerous magical creatures in a school environment. Harry set the parchment down. Picked up his toast. Ate it. "Well?" Hermione said. "The ministry wants a meeting," Harry said. "That's not what that is," Hermione said, because she'd been reading it upside down since it landed, because she was Hermione. "That's a formal summons to a Wisengamot session." Harry, that's not a meeting. That's a hearing." "They're trying to, I know what they're trying to do," Harry said. "What are we going to do about it?" Neville said, from 2 seats down, with the straightforward calm he'd been building all year, not the absence of concern but the decision that concern was less useful than readiness. "I'm going to go," Harry said. Hermione stared at him. "You're going to just, go? To a full Wisengamot session? Alone?" "Not alone," Harry said. "Certainly not," Grim agreed, "in the bond." "This should be entertaining," Naga said, with the particular tone he used when he meant something considerably stronger than entertaining. Dumbledore found Harry after breakfast, which Harry had expected. The old man moved on information with impressive speed, and the ministry owl on the Gryffindor table would have been noted. He appeared at Harry's elbow in the entrance hall with the expression of someone who has something important to say and is deciding how to say it. "I've seen the summons," Dumbledore said. "I assumed," Harry said. "I want you to know that I intend to appear on your behalf. As headmaster, as chief warlock, your chief warlock of the Wizengamot," Harry said. "Technically," Dumbledore said, with the slight discomfort of someone acknowledging a title they have complicated feelings about. "Though my relationship with the current minister is, Fudge," Harry said. "Cornelius Fudge. Who has been in office for 3 years and whose primary political objective is the management of public perception." He looked at Dumbledore. "He's afraid of you." "Yes," Dumbledore said, simply. "And he's afraid of me," Harry said. "In a different way. You he knows the shape of. Me he doesn't." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "Harry. A full Wizengamot session is, I'll be fine," Harry said. "Come if you want. But come as a witness, not an advocate. I don't need you to speak for me." The pause that followed had a particular quality, the quality of a man who has been the most important voice in almost every room he's ever entered, confronting the fact that he is not needed as a voice in this one. It wasn't easy for him. Harry could see that. He respected that Dumbledore was working through it in real time rather than performing acceptance he didn't feel. "I'll come as a witness," Dumbledore said. "Thank you," Harry said, and meant it. The 3 weeks between the summons and the hearing were the last 3 weeks of term, which meant exams, which meant Hermione in a state of focused intensity that Harry and Neville had learned to navigate the way experienced sailors navigate familiar difficult waters, with respect, with attention, and without suggesting at any point that perhaps she was slightly over-prepared. Harry did his exams. He did them well. Not because he'd crammed or revised in the way the other students had, but because 7 years of Grimm and Naga had built in him a way of understanding that was less about memorization and more about the relationships between things, the way knowledge was a system rather than a list, and systems once understood didn't require rote recall. Flitwick cried when he marked Harry's charms practical. Harry wasn't entirely sure whether it was happiness or alarm. McGonagall gave him 10 out of 10 on Transfiguration without comment, which for McGonagall was equivalent to a standing ovation. Snape gave him 9 out of 10 on potions and spent the remaining lesson finding technical reasons why the 10 was not applicable, which Harry accepted with equanimity because Snape's grudging academic honesty was something he'd come to appreciate as its own kind of integrity. On the last night of term, Harry sat in the Gryffindor common room after everyone else had gone to bed, in the chair closest to the dying fire, and Grimm settled beside him in the visible form Harry had stopped asking him to drop, because the common room at midnight was empty and the portrait hole was shut and there was no performance required of anyone. Grimm's silver eyes were on the fire. His smoke-edged form was settled in the way that suggested he intended to stay for a while. "Will it work?" Harry asked. Not anxiously. Genuinely. "What specifically are you asking about?" Grimm said. "The declaration. Claiming the realms formally. In front of the Wizengamot. It will work in the sense that it is real and real things have effects," Grimm said. "Whether those effects match what you intend is a function of how you do it. The three-realm authority is not something you perform. It is something you are. The Wizengamot will respond to it the way every living thing responds to it, with the instinctive awareness of something encountering a natural law. Some of them will try to argue against it," Harry said. "Some people argue against gravity," Grimm said. "They fall anyway." Naga, from his usual position coiled on the arm of the chair, said, "The political question is more complex. Several Wizengamot members have ties to interests that would prefer the three-realm authority remain unacknowledged. Particularly those connected to the remnants of Voldemort's first movement. A formal claim by the Lord of Three Realms makes certain things, certain old claims, certain old laws, active again. Laws that have been conveniently dormant for 400 years. Like what?" Harry asked. Like the law of realm sovereignty, Naga said, which predates the ministry by 800 years and states, in the old tongue, that no governing body may hold authority over a matter touching all three realms without the consent of the realm lord. Which means, in practical terms, the ministry has been operating without authority over about a third of its own jurisdiction, Harry said. More than a third, Naga said, with the satisfaction of someone who has been waiting to deploy this information for a very long time and has chosen the moment with precision. Anything touching life, death, or the natural world, which is to say, most of what the ministry actually does, falls under that provision. They will not want to acknowledge this. But they can't unacknowledge it once it's been stated publicly, Harry said. No, Naga said. Language, spoken before witnesses, in the true tongue, carries legal weight in magical law that no subsequent legislation can erase. The Wisengamot's own founding charter acknowledges the primacy of the old tongue declarations. They cannot argue themselves out of it without arguing against their own legal foundation. Harry looked at the fire for a while. Fudge is going to hate this. Deeply, Naga agreed, with undisguised pleasure. There is one more thing, Grimm said, and his voice had the quality it had when something genuinely important was coming, not heavier, not more solemn, just more deliberate. The declaration will be the beginning, not the end. Voldemort is still in the world. The fragment is still in your scar. What you do in that chamber will accelerate everything, the ministry's attention, the remnant Death Eaters, anyone who was watching from a distance and waiting to see whether you were real. Good, Harry said. You are certain. They should know I'm real, Harry said. All of them. Whatever they do with that information is up to them. Grimm's silver eyes moved from the fire to Harry, and what was in them was the same thing that had been in them on the first night in the cupboard, looking at a 4-year-old boy who had opened a door without knowing what was on the other side. Recognition. The particular regard of something ancient for something it has chosen. Yes, Grimm said. That is exactly right. July 15th was a clear morning, hot and still, the kind of summer day that makes London feel compressed and bright. Harry arrived at the Ministry of Magic through the visitor's entrance, the telephone box, because he was 11 and didn't have flu access, and the irony of the Lord of Three Realms entering through a red telephone box was not lost on him, and descended into the atrium. He was wearing plain dark robes. No crest, no insignia. He'd considered and rejected anything that looked like performance. The declaration would be the declaration, and it didn't need costuming. Naga was at his neck. Grimm ran alongside him in the realm's edge, invisible to the atrium's security wizards, who nonetheless stepped back slightly when Harry passed through the golden gates, the instinctive animal response to something their bodies understood better than their minds did. The golden fountain in the atrium center was a wizard and witch and various magical creatures in bronze, arranged in a hierarchy that Harry read in about 3 seconds and found objectionable on approximately 7 grounds. He didn't stop to look at it. He knew where the Wisengamot courtrooms were. He'd read the ministry's published floor plans, which were publicly available if you knew where to look, and which Hermione had found for him in a ministry publication from 1987 that was technically still in print but had a print run of 40 copies. Hermione had also, at breakfast that morning, pressed into his hand a folded piece of paper that was 4 pages of notes on Wisengamot procedure, precedent, relevant historical declarations, and 3 different legal arguments that she said were available to him if needed. He'd read them on the way to the ministry and put them in his pocket, not because he intended to use them but because Hermione had made them and they deserved to be in the room. The courtroom was on the 9th level. Harry took the lift. The lift operator said nothing but her eyes tracked him with the particular attention of someone who feels something they can't explain and is being professionally about it. When the lift opened on level 9 she said, without quite looking at him, "Good luck, dear." "Thank you," Harry said. The corridor outside the Wisengamot chamber was full of people. Not unusual people waiting full, but specifically gathered full, a cluster of ministry officials in formal robes, several people who had the energy of reporters without the notebooks that would identify them as reporters, and, standing slightly apart from all of them with the particular combination of gleaming authority and tightly managed anxiety that Harry had been reading about since he'd known what to read, Cornelius Fudge. The Minister for Magic was shorter than Harry had expected. He had the look of a man who had spent his entire career becoming the most important person in rooms and had recently begun to suspect that the metric he'd been using for importance was wrong. His bowler hat was lime green. His handshake, when it came, because he crossed to Harry the moment he appeared, because whatever else Fudge was, he was not a man who lost control of the room without a fight, was firm in the precise way of someone who has practiced firm handshakes. "Mr. Potter," he said, with the warm authority of someone performing warm authority. "I'm so pleased you came. I want you to know this is merely a formality, a few questions, a brief, it's a Wisengamot session," Harry said, pleasantly. "Which is fine. I'm happy to address them." Fudge's smile held. Of course. Now, I understand you may have some, concerns about the nature of the summons, but I want to assure you that the Ministry's interest is purely, Minister," Harry said, cutting through the performance without heat, "I'm not concerned. I came because I have something to say to the Wisengamot and this is a convenient opportunity." He looked at Fudge with the direct, complete attention of someone who is looking at a situation and calling it exactly what it is. "Shall we go in?" Something moved across Fudge's face, the professional smile flexing under the pressure of something it hadn't been designed to handle. Then he nodded, recovered, and gestured to the courtroom doors. They were heavy stone doors. They opened into the Wisengamot chamber. Harry had read descriptions of it. The descriptions were inadequate. It was tiered, circular, enormous, benches rising in concentric circles, filled with witches and wizards in plum-colored robes, the particular weight of assembled institutional power pressing down from all sides. The acoustics were designed for authority, for the impression of voices descending from above. The chair at the center of the floor, a single chair, with chains on the arms that twitched slightly as Harry walked toward it, was designed for exactly one thing: making the person in it feel small. Harry sat down. The chains rose. He looked at them. "Don't," Grimm said, with quiet amusement, because the chains had made the move toward his wrists and met the realm's edge and stopped, arrested by the same instinctive animal awareness that stopped everything in Harry's proximity that didn't belong there. The chains settled back against the chair arms and stayed there. The gallery murmured. Harry looked up at the assembled Wisengamot, 62 members in their plum robes, faces ranging from openly hostile to carefully neutral to genuinely curious. He found Dumbledore in the second tier, seated slightly apart from the main body, silver beard and half-moon glasses and an expression that was watching very carefully and making no move. He found Lucius Malfoy in the fifth tier. White blonde hair, black robes, a face built for condescension that was currently doing something more complex. His eyes met Harry's and Harry looked back steadily, and after a moment Lucius Malfoy looked away, which was interesting. Fudge took the podium at the chamber's head with the relieved confidence of someone returning to a position they understand. "The Wisengamot is in session," he announced, with the particular satisfaction of a man who believes he is about to manage something effectively. "We are here to address the matter of Harry James Potter, age 11, regarding, Minister," Harry said. Fudge stopped. "I'd like to make a statement before the charges are read," Harry said. Not loudly. The acoustics carried it without volume. "I believe that's within Wisengamot procedure. A respondent may make an opening statement before the formal record begins." A pause. Fudge looked at the Wisengamot scribe, who confirmed it with a small nod, because it was in fact correct, and Fudge could not in a formal session override correct procedure without creating a worse problem than the one he was managing. "You may," Fudge said, with the tight smile of someone granting something they can't refuse and choosing to look like it's voluntary. Harry stood up. He stood up slowly and deliberately, and when he was standing in the center of that enormous circular chamber with 62 Wisengamot members and a minister and a headmaster and the entire institutional weight of Wizarding Britain looking down at him from their elevated seats, he felt the bond do what it always did when he stood in his full self without apology. It expanded. Not visibly. Not with light or sound. More like a pressure change in the room, the way the atmosphere shifts before significant weather, and every person in that chamber felt it with the part of themselves that was still an animal and still understood what the animal part was telling them, and the murmuring stopped. The room was very quiet. Harry reached into his robes. The stone seal from the deep vault in Gringotts, the one with the 3 marks, the one that had been waiting for him for centuries in a vault that would only open for his resonance, sat in his palm. He didn't raise it dramatically. He just held it, and the 3 marks on it, the same tricolor resonance that had lit the Gringotts counter, green and silver and amber, pulsed once, warm and steady, and every enchantment in the chamber responded. The Wisengamot's own seal, carved above the presiding podium, flared with the same 3 colors. Just for a moment. Just long enough for everyone to see it. The murmuring came back, louder. "My name is Harry James Potter," Harry said, in a voice that was 11 years old and older than this building simultaneously. "I am the son of James and Lily Potter. I am the boy who lived in the version of this story that Wizarding Britain has been telling itself for 10 years. I am here because the ministry summoned me, and I came because I have something to say, and this chamber is the right place to say it." He paused. "Let the room hold that. I am also," he said, "Lord of the 3 realms." He said the next part not in English but in the true tongue, the language that Naga had spent 7 years teaching him, the one that predated every human language this chamber had ever heard spoken, and he said it in the clear precise voice of someone making a declaration before witnesses, because in magical law a true tongue declaration before witnesses was permanent, and everyone in the chamber who had done any historical study at all, which was several of them, understood exactly what was happening and went very still. He said, "I claim the realm of the living, which breathes and moves and chooses, which encompasses every being that draws breath under the open sky." He said, "I claim the realm of the dead, which remembers everything and forgets nothing, which holds all that has been and all that will be between its living and its ending." He said, "I claim the realm of beasts, which is older than speech and wiser than history, which runs beneath and through and beyond everything that calls itself civilization." He said, "These claims are made before witnesses, in the true tongue, under the law of realm sovereignty as established in the founding accords of magical governance, which the Wisengamot's own charter acknowledges and has never revoked." He said, "Let the record hold this." He stopped speaking in the true tongue. The room was the kind of silent that has texture. Naga uncoiled from beneath his collar. This, Harry had not planned explicitly, it was Naga's own choice, made in the moment, the ancient basilisk deciding that the declaration required a physical witness. He grew, not to his full size, but enough, large enough that the Wisengamot gallery saw him clearly, the black-green scales and the golden ancient eyes, the creature that every person in those seats recognized from their education as something that should not be alive and that was, absolutely, entirely alive and entirely unbothered by the assembled institution around it. Gasps. Movement in the gallery. 2 members in the upper tier stood. "That creature," someone said. "Is mine," Harry said. Clearly. Into the acoustic chamber that carried everything. As is the other. As are the 3 realms. This is not a threat. He looked around the gallery, the complete sweep of it, not skipping anyone, not avoiding the hostile faces or seeking the sympathetic ones. This is an introduction. Fudge had gone red. He had the look of a man watching a plan dissolve and trying to identify the exact moment it had stopped being a plan and become something else. "Mr. Potter," he said, with the strained patience of someone trying to wrest back a room, "the Wisengamot is not, this is a formal proceeding, not a venue for, minister," said a voice from the second tier. Fudge stopped. It was an old witch Harry recognized from his reading, Griselda Marchbanks, one of the most senior Wisengamot members, who had been in her position since before Fudge was born and who had the particular quality of elderly people who have survived long enough to stop being afraid of things that used to seem important. She was looking at Harry with the focused attention of a scholar encountering primary source material. "I believe," Marchbanks said, in a voice like dry parchment, "that the respondent has made a formal declaration in the true tongue before full witnesses." "Is that correct, scribe?" The Wisingamot scribe, a small nervous man whose job required him to record things accurately regardless of how those things complicated the day's intended agenda, said, "Yes, Madam Marchbanks." "Then the record will hold it," she said, which was a procedural statement but landed in the chamber like something far heavier. "As required." She looked at Fudge. "The law of realm sovereignty, Minister. I suggest legal check the charter in the next 20 minutes. Specifically Section 7. Fudge looked like a man being handed a problem he had not budgeted for. "Griselda, I am not addressing you," Marchbanks said, with the beautiful, terrible economy of someone who has earned the right to say exactly what they mean. She looked back at Harry. "Lord Potter. I have some questions, if you're willing." "Of course," Harry said, and sat back down, because the chains were still not moving and the chair was available and sitting conveyed that he was here for the conversation rather than the performance of it. "The three-realm bond," Marchbanks said. "The last documented instance was 4 centuries ago. The texts describe it as," she paused, choosing the word with precision, "irreversible." "Yes," Harry said. "And the seal you carry is from the primary vault?" "Yes." "How old are you?" 11, Harry said. "The bond formed when I was 4. The murmuring in the gallery changed character. Not quieter, more focused. The difference between a crowd reacting and a crowd thinking. 4 years old," Marchbanks said, and something in her voice moved, the professional composure adjusting slightly around something that was just human, just the response of an old woman to the image of a 4-year-old child in a bond with the fundamental forces of the magical world. "Under what circumstances?" Harry looked at her. He thought about the cupboard and the dust and the bruise on his ribs and the 6 steps and the 4 steps, and he said, "Circumstances that required extraordinary measures," which was the most honest and least weaponizable way to say it. Marchbanks looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, with the finality of someone moving a file from one category to another. "I have one more question," she said. "Go ahead," Harry said. "Voldemort," she said, and the chamber reacted to the name the way it always did, flinches, sharp inhalations, one person 2 tears up actually making a protective gesture, and Marchbanks waited for the noise to settle. "You handled the situation at Hogwarts in June." It wasn't a question. But it was. "Yes," Harry said. "And the presents?" "In Quirrell." "Is it gone from the school?" Harry said. "And considerably weaker than it was. The fragment in my scar is dormant. The rest of him is in the world somewhere without a body, which means he's neutralized for now." He paused. "Not permanently. He has additional anchors. I'll handle them." The gallery was very quiet with the specific quiet of people absorbing something that rearranges their sense of the scale of what they're dealing with. "Additional anchors," Marchbanks said. "I'll handle them," Harry said again. Simply. The way he said everything important, without qualification, without the hedge of uncertainty, because he was certain and performing uncertainty would be dishonest. Lucius Malfoy stood up. It was the first time he'd moved since Harry came in, and the movement had the particular quality of a man who has been calculating and has arrived at a position. "The Ministry," Malfoy said, with the measured authority of someone who has exercised power for long enough to wear it easily, "should be apprised of any plan to address the remaining elements of the matter you describe." "A Wisingamot committee could be formed to oversee." "No," Harry said. Malfoy's grey eyes, the same eyes as his son's, Harry noticed, with the same intelligence behind them and considerably more training in concealment, fixed on him. "The Wisingamot has authority over matters of significant magical, not over matters touching all 3 realms," Harry said. Which you now know, because Madam Marchbanks just invoked the charter provision and the scribe recorded it. The law of realm sovereignty is active. You're welcome to form a committee. It won't have authority over anything I do regarding the realms. A pause. You're 11 years old, Malfoy said, which was the second time today someone had said that to him as though it were an argument. You're going to keep bringing that up, Harry said, and it's going to keep being irrelevant. Someone in the gallery laughed. It was involuntary and quickly suppressed, but it was real, and it broke something in the room, the compressed formality, the weight of all that institutional authority, and in the space where it broke a different kind of air came in. Something less managed. Fudge tried one more time. The matter of unregistered dangerous creatures, Naga, Harry said, is a basilisk of sufficient age that the registration requirement postdates his existence by approximately 3,000 years. The statute cannot apply retroactively to beings that predate it. He looked at Fudge directly. I looked it up. Section 12, subsection 4 of the Being and Beast Registration Act 1796. Age of precedent exception. Your own lawyers will confirm it if you ask them, which I'd suggest you do before filing anything, because losing that argument publicly would be difficult for the ministry's standing. Fudge stared at him. The red in his face had reached his ears. Marchbanks made a sound that was absolutely, definitively a suppressed laugh. I am enjoying this tremendously, Naga said, in the private bond, with the satisfaction of someone who wrote the argument Harry just made and had been waiting to hear it deployed. The decree for underage sorcery, Harry said, before Fudge could reassemble. The magic I performed in the Hogwarts incident was performed under realm authority, not standard wizarding magic. The decree, as written, applies to standard wizarding magic as defined in the 1875 amendment. Realm authority is explicitly excluded in the original text of the decree because the original drafters understood the law of realm sovereignty. He paused. If you want, I can reference the page number. The room was quiet again. A different kind of quiet from before. Not the held breath quiet of institutional authority being very still, but the working quiet of people who are doing rapid recalculation. Dumbledore, in the second tier, had an expression Harry had never seen on him before. It took Harry a moment to identify it. It was pride, genuine, uncomplicated pride, without strategy in it, without any agenda. Just an old man watching something extraordinary happen and feeling what people feel when that happens. Harry looked at him and gave a small nod. Dumbledore inclined his head. Marchbanks was the one who called it. She stood, which in Wisengamot procedure was a formal signal, and said, I move that the charges detailed in the summons be dismissed for insufficient jurisdictional standing under the provisions cited by the respondent, said provisions to be confirmed by legal within 5 business days. In the interim the record stands as it is. Second, said 3 voices simultaneously from different parts of the gallery. Fudge looked at his hands on the podium. He looked at the gallery. He looked at Harry, sitting in the chair with the unchained arms, with Naga loose around his shoulders and the realm's edge still a pressure in the air that no one in the room had stopped feeling since Harry had made the declaration. He called the vote. He had no other option. It wasn't close. Afterward, in the corridor outside the chamber, Lucius Malfoy appeared at Harry's shoulder with the smooth precision of a man who has spent decades materializing in peripheral vision to establish dominance. Harry kept walking. A word, Lord Potter, Malfoy said, falling into step. You can have several, Harry said. Malfoy walked beside him in silence for a few steps, and Harry could feel him reassembling, reclassifying, running the same kind of rapid recalculation that his son had been running since the train, and Harry waited to see what the elder Malfoy's version of honesty looked like. There are people, Malfoy said, carefully, who will see today as a declaration of war. It wasn't, Harry said. It was a declaration of what exists. Those are different things. Not to everyone, Malfoy said. Then those people are working from an error, Harry said. I can't prevent people from making errors. I can make the truth clear enough that the error is obvious. He glanced at Malfoy. Your son is going to be fine, incidentally. Malfoy's step didn't break, but something in the set of his shoulders changed, barely, briefly. What makes you say that? Because he's spending a lot of energy reconsidering the certainties he was raised on, Harry said, and that takes courage. The kind that doesn't announce itself. He looked at Malfoy directly, briefly. He gets it from somewhere. Lucius Malfoy stopped walking. Harry kept going. Dumbledore caught him at the lifts. They rode up together in silence, the kind that didn't need filling, and when the lift reached the atrium Dumbledore said, Villanura's Comparative Magical Histories. Section 12 of the Registration Act. The Decree Amendment. Yes, Harry said. You prepared for every possible argument they could raise, Dumbledore said. I had help, Harry said. He thought of Hermione's 4 pages of notes in his pocket. Good help. You also, Dumbledore said, didn't need it. The declaration in the true tongue made the legal arguments secondary. The legal arguments made the declaration practical, Harry said. They're not in competition. Dumbledore looked at him for a moment. I owe you an acknowledgement, he said, and his voice had the careful precise quality of someone saying something they've thought about significantly. I built a plan around a version of you. A version that was, smaller. More manageable. Less, real. Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said. Less real. He paused. I am adjusting. I know, Harry said. You've been adjusting since October. Is it showing? Dumbledore said, and there was in it something that was almost humor, the particular self-deprecating humor of a very old, very confident man learning to be wrong gracefully. Only to someone who's paying attention, Harry said. They emerged into the atrium. The golden fountain was still there, the bronze hierarchy of wizard over creature, gleaming and smug. Harry looked at it as he passed. It will change, Naga said. Not today, Harry thought. But yes. Outside, London was going about its Tuesday with the absolute indifference of a city that contains millions of people each at the center of their own story, and Harry walked through it with Naga warm at his neck and Grimm's presence running at his shoulder through the realm's edge and the declaration settled in the magical record somewhere below the ministry building like a foundation stone that had always been there, waiting for someone to know it was load-bearing. He thought about the fragment in his scar. About the other Horcruxes, the additional anchors that he'd told the Wizengamot he'd handle, and he would, because Grimm had promised and Grimm's promises were the only kind he'd found that were actually as large as the word promise implied. The road ahead was long and real and full of people who were going to make themselves difficult in various ways, and that was fine. He was 12 in 16 days. He had 2 ancient beings who were his family and 2 11-year-olds who were becoming something equally irreplaceable and a castle that liked him and a very old headmaster who was learning how to be wrong and an ancient basilisk 900 years old in a chamber below the school who had agreed to be asked rather than commanded. He had opened a door in a dark cupboard 7 years ago and something enormous and permanent and true had come through it. He was not afraid of what was coming. He was, standing in the London sun with the wizarding world rearranged behind him and the open road ahead, exactly himself, entire, sovereign, and utterly, completely ready. Grimm's presence at his shoulder was warm and steady and ancient. Well done, Grimm said. Harry smiled. Not the small careful smile of a child managing himself in an adult world, not the controlled expression of someone performing confidence for an audience. A real one, full and easy, the smile of someone who is exactly where they're supposed to be. We're just getting started, he said. Yes, Grimm agreed. Finally, said Naga. And Harry Potter, Lord of 3 Realms, walked forward into the bright July morning, and the world, which had been waiting 10 years for a weapon, for a sacrifice, for a symbol, for anything except what had actually arrived, began, slowly and then all at once, to understand what it was dealing with.